Good morning. I now call the February 4th, 2021 Administrative Briefing and Work Session of the Marion County School Board to order at 9 a.m. Please silence your electronic devices to avoid disturbing others. I now ask the School Board Attorney to explain the rules for this work session.
This work session is a public meeting as defined in Florida's Sunshine Law. The board is dedicated to full transparency in its meetings and its work. In compliance with the Sunshine Law, the board has adopted uniform meeting procedures, including the right for citizens to participate. The board will allow public comment regarding any work session item listed on today's agenda at the appropriate time. Speakers must fill out a request form and hand it to the school board secretary. After the board and superintendent have completed their discussion on a particular agenda item, the secretary will call speakers' names in the order received. At the podium, speakers are asked to state their full name and address and to spell their last names. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. As required by the Sunshine Law, the board must maintain orderly conduct and proper decorum throughout this proceeding. Speakers may criticize subject matter and decisions in a respectful manner, but not people. Finally, speakers must be very careful not to violate the privacy rights of others, especially students and family members, by mentioning their names or other identifying information. Thank you for your attention to these important rules.
Thank you, Attorney Powers. We will now begin the work session with the Superintendent's Administrative Briefing. Good morning, Dr. Gullett.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Happy cold morning, but the sun is shining. Happy Thursday. We love that. So we do have a rather long agenda, so I'll be brief, but I do have a couple of updates for you during our briefing this morning. First, I want to recognize our amazing school counselors. Received this shirt. I wanted you to see this.
Nice.
Right? School counselors, all in for all students.
Oh, that's
Well
awesome.
said, right? So it is School Counselor Week, but it's not just School Counselor Week, it's School Counselor Day every day. So just like our other amazing employees, want to say a special thank you to our school counselors and the work that they're doing. Regardless of the pandemic or not, the extra efforts that are going on. So all in for all students. I love that theme. I also want to do a shout out to our assistant principals. I had an amazing day of learning all day yesterday with our assistant principals. They're broken up into smaller groups because of the social distancing. Had a great day of learning with them at various locations in schools, and they're sharpening their leadership skills in instructional leadership and looking at how do we meet the needs of all students. And so appreciate that and the work that they're doing in helping to lead our schools. I also want to do a special shout out to, while I was out at schools, to our amazing food service staff at North Marion High School. While I was passing through the cafeteria, I smelled this amazing food. It was pulled pork, and I said, I don't usually have time for lunch. I never usually make time for lunch. And so they said, well, it's really the best in town. And I said, okay. So I bought a lunch. They made it for me to go, and I went back and said, thank you. Amazing team and amazing food. So don't discount how great our food is in our schools. I can tell you firsthand it was fantastic. So thank you to them. And then last item for briefing is I want to talk a little bit about some conversations that came up previously, the utilization of our holiday non-work days. We talked about this. I know Board Member Campbell brought this up previously about January Day and February Day is coming up for President's Day. And so we had conversation, and I learned that what has been past practice is we've done the 4/10s and had that day off. And so in the month of January, we afforded employees the opportunity who needed to work with their supervisors to do that. And so we will continue to have that flexibility for those employees that need to work. We have not, however, recommended reopening that day because of safety concerns. If we start to let an employee here or there work, they're working alone, and there may not be the support staff to make sure they're in a safe location. And also for reduction of cost, we have a cost savings when we close down buildings. So we are working on that. We are constantly reviewing that. I would like Ms. Dobbins to come up very briefly and to provide an update to the board on those conversations and where we're headed in the future, so that you'll be aware and can ask us some questions. So Ms. Dobbins, come up, provide a really brief update on that. Thank you.
Good morning, all.
Morning.
So we also give flexibility on our staff on 30 minutes, coming in 30 minutes late or leaving 30 minutes early with a 30 minutes lunch. That helps take care of some daycare things and so forth. Moving forward, we do have some options that we can do when we look to next school year. When we look to next school year, we're talking about, again, the Martin Luther King Day. We're talking about President's Day. And then we have a new week created due to the midterm break that we've allotted April 15th, which falls on Good Friday. So some of the things we can do, as you are aware, we have multiple calendars for employees. We have some employees on 196 days, some on a 285 day, 180 day, did I say 200? Sorry, 180, 197 days. So different calendars all the way up to 260 days. So 260 days are 12-month employees. They range from people in the administrative salary schedule to the district specialized to IUPAT members to MESP members and so forth. So it's a large, broad category of just over 1,000 individuals. And then our other group, 240-day employees, have a window about a week off during the summertime before their schedule starts back up. And their days are very compressed as well. And then the other calendar. So any employee who works 200 days or more currently has to do the 4-day, 10 hours on Martin Luther King and President's Day this year, and then whatever we decide on the April day next year. There is a way for those working from 200 to 230 days to change their calendars to where they do not work on those 3 days. However, for every day we don't work for those groups, we add it to their beginning or end time during the summer. So in essence, their days shorten over the summer by up to 1 to 3 days, however we work that. But that is an option. We could still keep them on an 8-hour, 4 days during those holidays in that April. But again, we're going to add those days at the beginning or the end, shortening their summer. For 240-day employees, we are not able to do that. If we do that, then their contract ends June 30th and they start July 1st. So they have no break in between. They roll right into the other one. The only option there is to start them July 6th. And then those individuals, if we give them those 3 days off, and they work 8 hours those 3 holidays, then they're having to work the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of Thanksgiving, where they normally have them off. So those are different pathways we can go. Of course, we want to do what's best for our employees, and we want to know if you have any options as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. King.
Yeah. Dr. Gullett, I appreciate you bringing this forward. I know in the past board members have brought this up and it kind of got kicked down the road and was never addressed. So thank you for bringing it back up. Hearing this, I do have a suggestion that maybe what we could look at, and that could be if we could just look at the employees that are having to work the 4 10-hour days. What is it, 3? Is it the 3 holidays? Martin Luther King.
Next year it will be 3, Martin Luther King, President's Day, and possibly April 15th, which is Good Friday.
Okay. So if we think about and reflect on what a lot of these employees do, they are working after school hours anyways. They're doing tag arts on Saturdays. They're staying after school functions that could be going on. There's literacy days that they do. There's been night times where they work Halloween nights. Daycare could be difficulty, just for those certain days. So I would like to throw out the option that maybe we could, and just for the 4-day employees, if we could look at that as a paid holiday for them, it's not going to cost our district anything, and it would just be a time factor. So it would be normal hours, because those 3 days or those 4 days when they have to work extra, just, for those 3 days, it can be challenging, to, like I said, the daycare. And we do ask a lot of these employees, and they do it anyways. It's not like they're losing those hours or going to gain those hours, because I can tell you they're working many, many more hours than the typical day anyway. So I would propose that if we could pull that one off.
I
Go ahead.
do just want to say the federal recognized holidays does not include April 15th. Federal recognized holidays are Martin Luther King holiday and President's Day.
Okay, so we could look at Martin Luther King then and President's Day.
Well,
and Mar-
I mean,
So I think we have to be really, really careful. We would have to have very clear documentation on hours worked outside of regular work days. I'm not really sure how we would manage that. I think that it becomes, I know that they're doing it, but what becomes problematic with labor law and everything is that documentation of hourly employees, am I correct?
so if it's a holiday, and Ms. Bosnellis, I'll lean on you. I believe if it's a holiday and it's a federally recognized holiday, an entity can pay their employees for not working. And I see Attorney Powers.
Okay,
That is correct.
okay.
However, the April 15th, I don't believe we can do that.
One day that we have to take care of.
Right.
What's the cost on that, Ms. Bosnellis?
I don't think it would cost us anything.
It would be a zero-sum game. It'd be a neutral cost because of the fact that we would still be expecting, right, right.
If it's a paid holiday, there is no additional cost. It's just one less day employees are working. So if you think about it, it would be 3 less days that folks are here working. So if anything, it's towards productivity.
So then we will only have to look at that one day, which is the April 15th. I don't have a problem. I like the idea, actually. I think we just need to let them figure out that one day, and maybe that could be that one day for that summer.
Ms. Campbell?
So I actually have two questions. One is related to teleworking. So as we need employee, and so this may even carry over beyond these holidays, just asking in general, summertime employees that are working 410s and that sort of thing, do we have the ability, obviously logged into your computer, working with the technology director now, being able to track what's happening on a computer during an average day, if teleworking would be an option? It's kind of just a question, a general question. And my other question is related to comp time, which I'm assuming we don't track or have anything to do with comp time.
And that's what Kelly's talking about. is
Right.
that comp time.
Okay, and that was the other question. I don't know if there would be I'm sorry?
I don't think we track that.
So I actually would like the opportunity for us to at least explore a comp time scenario if that is something that's possible.
There is comp time in the CBA language for MEA. That is the only legal entity that has comp time, and they have to document it, what they're doing. The other thing I'd like to throw out is we do a 4 10-hour day in the summer. So is that what you're
That's what I'm referring to.
addressing? Okay.
So because now that we have additional opportunities, while we're having this conversation, it's the 4 10-hour days don't just happen on those 3 holidays. They happen all throughout the whole summer. And if we had the opportunity to explore that option further from a teleworking standpoint, that I'm certain would also benefit some of our employees who also deal with childcare in the summer. While we're exploring it, let's talk about it.
Just to let you know, in the summer, we do allow employees to just use that half hour that Mrs. Dobbins referred to, so they can do a half-hour lunch and then leave a half hour earlier. So instead of leaving at 6, they would leave at 5:30. Or if you want to do it in the mornings, that is allowed. If I'm just wondering if you are suggesting that we just go back to a 5-day during the summer. Is that what you're suggesting?
Perhaps.
Teleworking is only for COVID related right now. So
Right.
you would have to change your policies at this point if you want to incorporate telework.
Okay.
If we're exploring that, we probably need to look about the cost effectiveness for that.
Yeah.
Because I know when that was began, so we need to look about the cost effective savings because I'm curious.
That's the main reason we went
Did it-
to
For the summer, correct. So, and hearing that they are comp those 30 minutes and stuff, but those are two separate issues. Today I'm focused more on just the holidays where those weeks are just, a little extra longs if we could.
Right. Yes, a few things in play here. And I do like the idea of the federal holidays, go ahead and paying our employees for that. If there's anything that we can do to help them, then now's a good time to do it. And as far as the Good Friday, that could be another possibility to provide flexibility to employees with the half hour, taking the half hour lunch, and I think we do need to look at modernizing our policy when it comes to teleworking. If this pandemic has done anything, it has forced us to think of work in new ways and productivity in new ways. And there's so much that has evolved, and it's become so much more accepted to telework. And some people really feel very productive teleworking, and others are like, I cannot wait to get back to the office. So it's very individualized. So I'd love to explore that further, but I feel like I'm hearing consensus on the two federal holidays, at least for right now. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. Yep. And then thinking in terms of providing that flexibility for Good Friday, and just so anyone watching is not confused, we're talking about for next year. Okay. Not this coming President's Day.
Could we?
No.
Or,
No?
We've already built those calendars, and remember, those calendars trigger pay?
Right.
And so forth, so to change those, I'm not saying it's not impossible, I'm just saying it would generate some, I don't want to speak for finance, but I think it would generate some angst in payroll and how we change those schedules and so forth.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
this is when everyone has to remember how big this ship is. And if we can be really positive about making these changes for next year and stick to it, and then everything runs smoothly and the checks don't get messed up, then it's all good as far as I'm concerned.
Can I please ask a couple of clarifying questions? When you are saying that you want to do the 2 paid holidays, is that for everyone currently who works those days from 200 day to 260? Or are we wanting to adjust calendars for any of these categories to have them have that day off, not be a paid holiday, and the days applied somewhere in the beginning or end of their schedule? I just want to be very clear of the ask.
I think the ask is the employees that are working the 4 days, the 410s, that's what we're looking at is them, and not adding on to.
Yes, ma'am.
Their weeks.
Those groups are any employee working 200 days to 260-day calendars.
Right.
So your recommendation is that they do a paid holiday, Martin Luther King and President's, and we'll figure out April 15th
Right.
based on some discussions, and then look at summer as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Does that have to go back to MEA, or can we do that without the union's involvement?
So for these, it's not a union simply because not every union member is on the same calendar. So it's just a calendar piece.
Okay.
Now, yes, IUPAT and MESP and MEA, no, we don't have to go back. We have to go back. And we're currently in negotiations with those anyway.
Okay, so now's a good time to do it then.
Okay, yeah, and they can, but
Just-
the ones that are not union, obviously, we can go ahead and do it for them because there's nothing to be bargained or anything, so, and it's not very often we get to come up here and do anything for those employees anyway, so this is a good time to show them that we have their bags.
Just for clarity of transparency here, it's not all members of those unions, though. Please understand that.
Yeah,
Right.
Okay.
Right, only the ones that are actually.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. And when you've experienced it both ways, as a 220-day employee, I had to do the 410s, and was difficult. It also had some benefits to it, but I love the idea of being able to give our employees some support wherever we can, whenever we can, not just because it's a pandemic. I think that we all acknowledge that folks work really hard, and they're going to continue to work hard and continue to work harder the more supported they feel. So thank you for bringing that up, Vice Chair King. I think it was a great idea.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I may, do I hear that the board would like us to explore the teleworking piece and bring that back?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. All right.
That concludes my briefing. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you, Dr. Gullett. All right, next up, we have the annual investment report with Ms. Posada.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Chair, Vice Chair, board members, Dr. Gullett, Mr. Powers, and Nicole. We invest a lot of money on behalf of the school board, and as part of that, we have an investment advisor because we do not hold the expertise that a true investment advisor has. We have an investment policy that limits what we can and cannot invest in. Investment advisor actually oversees how we're investing those funds, and they actually invest our core funds. You have a PowerPoint presentation. He's not going to go over every slide. I know your time is. So without further ado, I'll introduce Steve Alexander from Public Financial Management, which we refer to as PFM.
Thank you, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to make sure everybody could hear me. If I could just get an acknowledgement that you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you afforded me the opportunity to join you today by Zoom, and I hope to see you next time in person. Again, my name is Stephen Alexander. I'm a managing director and partner at PFM, and we help to oversee the Marion County School District investments. I did want to take a little bit of time to kind of give you an overview of the calendar year 2020, which I think we're all glad that that year is gone. It was an interesting year, obviously, because of COVID-19. It had a severe effect on the investment markets, the stock market, throughout the year. But I wanted to let you know that as we close out 2020, the investments for Marion County Schools went through the whole year without any detrimental effects on the portfolio or on the liquidity of the portfolio. And I say that because liquidity was the number one concern about investment markets, particularly when the economic shutdown occurred in March and April. As you probably remember, if you had watched your retirement assets or your 401ks, they all dropped about 34% in March and in April because of the nationwide economic shutdown. The good news is that the Federal Reserve stepped in very swiftly and very confidently, helping to restore the market with a number of liquidity programs, the same kind of programs that we saw back in 2008 when we went through the credit crisis. That helped restore the confidence of the marketplace and brought equilibrium back to the marketplace. The end result is the markets really calmed down by the summertime, and you've probably seen the equity markets really have a V-shaped recovery to where if you look at the Dow Jones, it's over 30,000 right now. And if you remember back in March, it got as low as 18,000. So we've come a long way, both in the equity market as well as the general economic situation. So as we just talked a little bit about the investment policy, the school district has a very detailed investment policy centered around state statutes and also centered around diversification. In today's presentation, and I assure you that I will not go over every single page, I will focus on the main aspects of it. If you go to page 5 of the presentation, you will see the overall portfolio holdings of the school district. A couple things this chart tells us is, one, that all the investments were in compliance with the school district's investment policy. And we also maintain lots of liquidity by investing in the interlocal government investment pools. These are all highly rated AAA-rated pools to provide and to ensure liquidity for the school district. As I said earlier, that was the number one theme in the beginning of the calendar year of 2020 because we saw this tremendous flight to quality, people and investors leaving the equity market and buying treasuries, and that caused a lot of concern about liquidity. The school district didn't have to be concerned about that because we have plenty of day-to-day liquidity. Other investments included corporate bonds, asset backs, other securities. I did want to tell you a little bit about the Boeing story. We did have Boeing corporate bonds in the portfolio. You probably saw throughout the year Boeing was downgraded several times by S&P and Moody's because obviously Boeing was suffering due to the shutdown and airports were empty, folks were not flying. We were very diligent about those holdings, and with the credit analysis showing us that Boeing is the second largest military contractor for the United States, this company was ultimately not going anywhere. We held the bonds throughout most of the year, and we were able to sell everything back in November and realize capital gains on every holding. So by being diligent and watching the bonds carefully, I want to report to you that those bonds were sold and everything was sold at a profit. So I think we were managing through that situation very carefully, and everything has turned out quite well for your portfolio. If I could have you turn to page 8 of the presentation, I'm happy to report that the core portfolio, which is the longer portion of your portfolio, has outperformed the benchmark about 20% more than the benchmark. So we ended up the year at 4.25 interest rate return. And if you think of where the Fed funds rate, the overnight investment rate, currently is around 6 basis points, this is a good result for the school district. This speaks well sort of to the master investment plan, which is having money short-term for liquidity purposes to meet your payroll, accounts payable program, if you will, and the monies that can be invested out a little bit longer provides the district with great amount of diversification so that interest rates, as historically lows that we're experiencing, is not providing a tremendous negative impact on the interest earnings. So this longer-term portfolio, as we know as a core portfolio, has done quite well given the economic situation that we've experienced. If I could have you turn your attention to page 22, I wanted to sort of touch on this. This is sort of a national issue that I kind of want to share with you today, is really what we experience with consumer spending on the left-hand side. You can see that in the first quarter of 2020, with the economic shutdown, we saw consumer spending drop dramatically, and we saw, really for the first time in a long time, the United States savings rate greatly improved. And that is going to be part of the pent-up demand, if you will, that we're hoping to experience later on in 21. And that is really going to be dependent on the success of the vaccines and also the number of folks that take the vaccine. We see this as an economic driver. The more success that the COVID-19 vaccines have, the economy will react positively to that. We're not expecting that until the third quarter of this year and into, of course, 22. If I could have you turn to page 24, I just want to show you sort of the overall interest rate environment that we've experienced this past calendar year. On the left-hand side of this chart, you will see U.S. Treasury yield curve. You see a gold line and 2 blue lines on the left-hand side. This is from a 3 months investment all the way out to a 10-year investment. The gold line represents interest rates that we experienced in 2019, and I kind of refer that as the good old days when we had interest rates and we had a yield curve. And we left 2019, entered January of 2020, pretty optimistic about the future of our economy. We saw a little bit of slowdown in markets, but nothing, of course, to the severity that we experienced in 2020. So I kind of dubbed 2019 as the good old days, even though those interest rates were still relatively low on a historical basis. Then you can see what happened when the Federal Reserve stepped in. They reduced interest rates by 150 basis points to provide that very important liquidity back to the marketplace. And you can see these interest rates in the blue curve. We're right back to where we were in 2008, 2009 timeframe. So all that economic gain that we experienced over the last 10 years, we're right back to where we were due to the credit crisis of 2008. Obviously, the pandemic is a health crisis, but of course has caused many financial crises throughout the markets. Looking forward, which is probably the most important part of our discussion today, is that we're going to be experiencing these low interest rates for at least the next couple of years. It's obviously dependent on the vaccines and how successful they are till we get herd immunity, which will allow various parts of our economy to come back and to produce and to grow the economy. The Federal Reserve has been very clear that these interest rates are going to be with us for several years going forward. So from a budgetary standpoint, this is where it's going to have an impact on the school district's budget from an interest earning standpoint. And of course, we're monitoring that very carefully as we proceed over the next couple of years. The next page I'll take you to is page 26. This will just give you a perspective. I want to kind of give you a feeling of how the market reacted in the beginning of 2020 in the first quarter. These are total return numbers, rates of return, if you will, for various indices of fixed income bonds that we work with. You can see how dramatic the returns dropped in the first part of this year. And we had to climb back up from this big hole that the economic shutdown put us into. But you can see markets have responded in a positive way, and we're kind of getting back to where we were in 2019. Certainly not at the same interest rate levels, but from a volatility, less volatility, more stable markets have returned back to the financial world. My last chart is page 29 for you to kind of look at. This is, I think it's important to look at our economy from an equity. Obviously, we're not investing in stocks. Everything is high-grade fixed income. But a good education of the fixed income market is also understanding what has transpired in the equity markets, which you probably see every day, probably maybe get alerts on your smartphone on where the Dow is on an ongoing basis. But this will kind of give you an idea of how dramatic the drop was in March and how we've climbed back from that based on the CARES Act and also what the Federal Reserve did to the marketplace. So in summary for everybody today, I wanted to just sort of summarize that the portfolio went through a very difficult economic situation, obviously, that we've all been experiencing. But because of the investment policy, diversification, watching for high credit quality, and ensuring that we have plenty of liquidity has allowed the district to weather this economic storm. And I see brighter futures for this year and into next year. As I said earlier, obviously, we're going to be investing in a very low interest rate environment, but we expect the volatility to have dissipated and hopefully a little bit calmer waters will be in front of us. And those are my remarks for you today, and always, as always, open to any questions and how I can be helpful to you this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. That was a very informative report, and to me it showcases that running this school district is a business, and there is a lot to it. We are all in for all kids, and to truly be able to do that, we have to be able to manage our money wisely and invest our money wisely. So this was great. Thank you very much. Board members?
Thank you.
No, I greatly appreciate, and the summary of investment sheet, I don't know who did this, but thank you very much, because it really paints a good picture of where we were. I just told Kelly it's a great time to buy a house, but not a great time to invest.
Depends on
That's
what you're
right.
investing in. It can be a great time to
I
invest.
got one question. Did we make any money last week on GameStop?
We're not in Robinhood, so.
How's our Bitcoin doing?
Thank you, Ms. Alexander.
My pleasure. And if I could just add on real quickly is that as a firm, you had a discussion about telecommuting and stuff. As a firm, we're a national firm. We have 34 offices around the nation. We've all been working from home since March 12th. We've got about 1,000 employees, 34 offices, and we have been working from home. And we think it's been very successful. I wanted to share that with you based on your other conversation. And we're looking to do more working from home going into the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
Thank you very much. That's great perspective. And Ms. Posada and Ms. Boston-Ellis, thank you as always for everything that you do to guide us in the right financial direction.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you,
is there-
everybody.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none. We'll move forward with fiscal year 2020-2021 budget update of December 31st, 2020 with Ms. Boston-Ellis.
Good morning again.
Good morning again.
Just want you to know that as far as investments are concerned, it's safeguarding our principal first, then making sure the funds are liquid, and then the return on investment. So that is how we look at investing all of our funds. And Mr. Alexander and his company they have been really, really good. And Alice works very, very well with them.
How long have we had this company?
I believe it's been about 4 or 5 years,
Okay.
maybe more.
All right. Just wondering.
Some of you may remember I think it was maybe 2010 when the SBA sort of collapsed and they grabbed our money and held it. At that point is when we were required to hire an investment advisor. The whole SBA was revamped, and they looked at the investments included in their investment portfolio, because that was always the safe place to put your funds. All of our tax proceeds would go directly to the SBA. And then in that November, I remember so well, it was, we were freezing your assets, and we had just had our funds transferred from the property appraiser to SBA. So we did get our principal back eventually, but no interest from that.
Wow.
And we weren't the only ones. There was the county, the cities,
Right,
and school districts
right.
all over
Right.
the state of Florida.
Was that at the same time when our rating dipped slightly? Am I remembering that right?
This had to do with just the market, so it would be. Yeah.
Different, okay.
So let's move on to the budget update, and this is for the current year's fiscal year budget. We'll look more at the budget. There's a lot of speculation going on, the governor's budget, what we're hearing from legislators, and I heard you talk about that somewhat on a few days ago. But Dr. Gullett and I talked about this, and it's like, what do we do with this presentation? Because we don't have the third calculation. They probably will not provide that to us. We've been told any adjustments that will be made may happen in May and maybe even September of that fiscal year. So we were prepared for a cut in our budget based on the number of students that did not show up and that we're still missing. So we are hopeful that whatever impact any adjustment will have will be minimal, and that we are prepared for that. So I just wanted you to know that, unless there is some huge impact. What else we do know is that there was an emergency order, 2020 E07, and because there are some districts that truly grew, funds were provided to those districts. And those of us who had lost students were adjusted for those funds that were provided to the districts that were growing. It looks like our impact was pretty nominal. It was about $300,000. So we are hoping that that maintains and it doesn't get much lower. Also, the EO7 did not adjust our transportation revenue. So you know that was based on the ridership. We were very, very concerned about that because our ridership is way down due to COVID-19 and social distancing. So they decided that they would not adjust our revenue for transportation. For Marion County, it's a little over $10 million. Our expenditures associated with that is about 18 or 19 million. So that would have been a big hit as well. Also, I told you the third calculation will not be issued. A separate memo is coming from DOE. We talked to them yesterday. I'm on a finance council, and we asked where is our memo because we have to take care of our add-ons, all of the AP, the ACE, the industry certifications. We need to provide those funds for the schools. So when we also want to know about FES, the Family Empowerment Scholarship, how much of a cut that will be. And although we do, we also put something in fund balance to cover what we think the reduction in revenue related to McKay as well as the Family Empowerment Scholarship. We just need to know if our estimate is in line with what they're actually going to cut those funds. So they told us yesterday, Mark Edgars at DOE said that we should be getting the memo soon. That could be a week or 2 weeks.
Ms. Boston Ellis, may I ask a question?
Yes.
So the bill that has a companion bill, both the House and the Senate, that combines the Garner scholarships with all of that, I know that's not for this fiscal year, but
Correct.
that could have a tremendous impact on us, correct?
Correct. And what is interesting about that bill is that we really don't know what kids or what families are going to take advantage of that. But we're responsible for creating the IEPs for those students. We're responsible for turning in that information to DOE. They tell us who's applied, and then at the end of the year, those funds are removed from our revenue. So that's why we always reserve for that estimate. But you are correct. In some ways, it would be great if they don't add it to our FTE, making us think that we're actually growing. It doubled, not just for us, but other districts. We had 300 FTE last year for the family empowerment. This year it was over 600. So think about all those kindergartners that are not coming to our school district. And that'll have ramifications because next year there'll be fewer first graders, fewer third graders, and so forth, so forth. So we've got to find a way to get those kids back in public education.
Well, and the language is concerning because it's a little bit deceiving.
Yes.
People are thinking that the funds are actually going to K-12 public education.
Right.
And it's not. So we're working on that.
Just like charter schools, where typically we have to manage the funds, make sure they meet certain criteria, but we have no authority over them at all. You're exactly right. Thank you for bringing that up. There is an ESSER 2, another CARES Act. There's more funding coming. No details on it yet. We don't even know when we'll get it. We don't know if they'll use that to plug the shortfalls for next year. But there is another grant coming. If you hear anything about that, yes, we are going to get another grant. And again, it'll be based on our Title I population. And as all of you know, all of our schools are Title I except for 4. You've heard from me about unemployment costs. They've gone up from just, 4 or 5 times more than what we typically pay. So we adjusted the budget for that. We're estimating $400,000 this year. Along with other school districts, our food service programs have suffered. We did an analysis for FAD, and it just blew me away to see it on paper that 2 years ago we had a fund balance of 9 million plus. Last year it went down to 7, and we're projecting less than 2 million for the end of this fiscal year.
That is a huge.
So Ms. Johnson and her team put their heads together. She and food service directors of the state of Florida had petitioned the state to change some of the summer feeding rules, and that's why we went to summer feeding on January. I spoke with her last night, and she said that they are seeing an increase in the revenue that we are allowed to request from the ag. Only about $25,000 for the month of January, but we're hoping as we come up with more innovative ways to get kids to eat lunch and eat breakfast, that those too will increase, and we'll be able to get that fund balance where it needs to be. But they are working around the clock trying to figure out more innovative ways to encourage our students to take advantage of free breakfast, free lunch, free snacks.
Ms. Postinellis, was that what created this dramatic drop? Was it fewer students eating, essentially?
Correct, and social distancing. Because of social distancing, because of COVID, we had students that were at home that would have normally ate breakfast and lunch. They were at home. We're one of the more fortunate school districts now that we have about 87% of our students back, and we're hoping that that will also encourage them. But if you're a typical high school student, you sit around a table with your friends. You know, lunchtime is the conversation time, but now they're having to social distance, so some of them are foregoing the meal so that they can have a conversation with their friends. So we've got to find more innovative ways to get them to eat meals, whether it's putting a cart out in the annex. I know we do that at some high schools.
And some elementary schools.
So it becomes like a grab and go
Grab and
kind
go,
of a
yeah.
thing. But I remember being at Pheasant the first week of school, and we were literally handing the meals to the kids, and they said, "No, I ate at home."
Right.
And they were refusing the meals. So we went back to the I would say went back and tried to think, okay, what other ways can we get the kids to eat the meals, because they're free. And so we just I think Susan's working with Kevin to try to do some more blasts and just to remind people that eating those meals are good. It helps your education process. It's been proven. So any opportunity you get to encourage parents or the community to make sure the kids are eating their lunch will only help the school district.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm so glad you brought this up, because it's very significant. I mean, to look at that drop in revenue, and we know that kids that have a good breakfast, you know, and a good lunch are better learners. Go ahead, Ms. Campbell.
I have a couple questions about that. First of all, with us now going to free breakfast and lunch across the board, middle schools and high schools as well, is that where that increase is coming? Because now we have students who used to have to pay that don't have to pay any longer.
That's part of it, but the other part is the fact that we're able to request a higher rate per child because it's under the summer feeding umbrella.
Okay.
And before we were not, because there were stipulations. If you do the summer feeding, you can't do this. You can't request lunch or snacks. We couldn't request the snacks under the regular food service program, National School Lunch. But now all of those were relaxed, and so we are able to submit more requests for funding.
Okay, then it's interesting that you've brought this up also, because I know my children pass by the breakfast every day whenever it's being passed out. So what you're actually suggesting is that kids need to pick up those breakfasts, and that actually will end up helping the district, even if they don't have time to eat it once they get to the classroom, perhaps. So that's interesting. And same thing with snacks, I guess, now that you're mentioning that. I mean, we're packing a snack every day. So are elementary schools having access to snacks that then parents wouldn't have to be packing every day? I mean, I think there's a lot of communication here that I'm unaware of as a parent. And so I think that if we were able to spread that awareness through our SAC committees, through our PTO, I just think there's more information there that's just being revealed to me anyway.
Well, I came in and talked to you the other day about it because personally, my son is in school. I want to know because I was, he was kind of getting over because I'm paying for lunch and
Yeah.
he was using a la carte and getting all the other stuff. So, and that was, and I was stopping them by McDonald's and all that stuff. So,
Now he's in trouble.
so I went in and asked Teresa, explain to me about this because I had heard about it, and so the word is out. We just need to probably push it out a little bit more and encourage these kids and the parents to know that they do have meals at school that they can get, and it's not costing. But it doesn't. They still have to. If they're going to a la carte, they still got to do that. That's
Right,
still going to cost
right.
them.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
But the free food is there for them.
You know what, Board Member Cummings, it'd be great if you did a public service announcement saying what you just said.
I know, I had just replenished my
Question's
kids.
ready.
I had just replenished my kids' account.
Yeah,
I
these
did,
slick
and
kids.
I'm like, okay, well, then we get free lunch. The very next day, I just replenished their accounts.
But my son never told me. He just kept getting
Oh.
the money. Just kept getting the money.
Oh,
I think
my.
we did a press release on it.
Yeah.
Right, it just came out the next day, after I had replenished them the night before.
Of course, Murphy's Law.
So that was what I know. So let me move on to the budget update. And I want to thank Mrs. King because she was the one, under her leadership as chair a few years ago, requested this. We always wanted an opportunity to do sort of a mid-year reflection, but thank you for putting this in process because you do get monthly information, you do get quarterly reports, but this is a way to have an open conversation, so I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the dialogue.
So I'll move on. Again, just a funding recap for what happened in the 2021 year. The base student allocation did increase by $40. And in the past, you know that when the base student allocation increases, that means the economy is healthy. But what has happened over the past 10 years, that's been where the legislators have sort of tweaked the BSA when they wanted to increase maybe another categorical. So that's really no longer a reflection of the economy, basically, as it used to be. Because if the base student allocation would increase, we knew the funding would begin to flow a lot better. So there was an increase in mental health, which is also an important categorical that we have now. I believe this has been the second or the third year of the mental health allocation. And of course, an increase in our ESC guaranteed, which is supplemental funding for our ESC students. There was a decrease in digital. You may have remembered 2 years ago, it was over $1 million and then slowly has disappeared and now it hovers in the $100,000 area. And then also there was a slight decrease in our turnaround supplemental services allocation, and that was for our turnaround schools, supporting them. There's a new allocation, which was the teacher salary increase. And oh, by the way, as I emailed you, we will start receiving funding February 9th. Employment Services Records Department, payroll, and finance. We all got together yesterday and sort of came up with a plan. And we will let you know what our time frame is once we get our arms around the actual base salary. Because remember, we told you during when we were negotiating that number may go up or it may go down. It looks like it's gone up maybe $100. So we're just making sure we've grabbed every employee that's eligible, make sure they're in the right category, because there's two categories. There's the 80% pot and the 20% pot. So this is very different than what we've done in the past, so it may take a little bit longer so that we get it right. Yes. And if you hear any complaints, please have them call us. We will address every concern of employees to make sure that they understand that allocation.
Who would they be, when you say call us, who would that be?
That would be payroll once
Payroll.
once it has been
Okay.
issued.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll send out something. We talked about doing a no reply type of email announcing that.
So Ms. Boston-Ellis, if they're being told they can call payroll, will you certainly let payroll know that they could have
Oh, they know.
several?
I'm sure she's listening right now.
Okay.
And our payroll department, you will be surprised at the hundreds of calls they get
Okay.
every
Every
day.
day? Okay.
And they've been calling them about this allocation, and they're a great department. They're very
Absolutely.
responsive, and if you think about it, this is six people paying over 6,000 employees. But they're very responsive, and they will respond to them. We're continuing the funding compression. If you recall, that was where they looked at all the school districts and saw who was getting funding under the middle. And we were one of those, so we got additional funds for that. Also, our PICO continued to be allocated to charter schools. We didn't get any PICO this year. And our property values increased almost 8%, which was reflective of additional local dollars. I'll speed up. So the first slide I want you to look at is the budget for all district funds. And there was a slight increase, about 2.7 million. The majority of that increase is due to grants. Title II was amended in, Title IV, and of course the CARES grants, some of those were amended in. There were some charter school funds that were just a flow through for, and then also HIPPY grants. So the large increase was due to the special revenue fund. We did have some reduction in the general fund, and that was due to FEFP, an adjustment that was made in the fifth calculation. So that was pertaining to 1920. So we had about an $800,000 adjustment to our current year revenue based on prior year information. And then also, of course, the property tax, the October valuation was lower than what we estimated. And because of that, we had to reduce what we considered as budgeted local revenue. Again, we will, that amount will be adjusted again after, I guess, folks go and complain about their taxes. And then there sometimes is an adjustment to school districts at that point. And I think all of you have sat on that committee at one time.
Value Adjustment Board?
Yeah, that's what
Yes.
it is too. I was
You're
like,
on.
you know about that.
Yep.
So that's another time that we'll have an adjustment, but that's just normal, and we anticipate that.
Ms. Nelson, I just have a quick question about, and maybe this is not the right time to ask it, but about the new assessment that's coming out from the city of Ocala for all property owners in the city. How are we looking? I know that no one is exempt. I know that nonprofits are going to have to pay it. So I was wondering if we have already taken a look at all of the property we own in the city and how that's going to impact us.
So for fire assessment, we stopped paying that. I don't know that we ever paid a fire assessment. I believe we started with the stormwater fee and we stopped paying that, and I think there was a legal settlement where that has started back again. But we have not taken that into account in terms of utility bills. We'll probably have to get some more information on that from Mr. Herlihy to figure out what that impact would be.
We just, from the nonprofit perspective, we saw yesterday that there is going to be a significant, because they don't pay property taxes, or they don't pay any taxes at all on anything, but because it's not a tax and it's an assessment from the city of Ocala, it is going to be an impact to every property owner.
And everybody's going to get a separate invoice. It's not going to come out on there. So I was wondering the same thing with although that's still, the fire fees is still sitting there in litigation, we pulled out the stormwaters, and I'm not sure how that'll impact us. We may want to check to see if we're going to get that assessment, because they're not calling it a fee, they're calling it assessment.
We're monitoring that regularly.
Okay.
And that is something that I really can't give answers yet that are going to really be reliable. So as we know more, small things can change big parts of the situation, so.
We really need to watch that.
And if I'm not mistaken, attached to that same thing, there was a refund that was supposed to go backwards as well. So I'm not sure if there's an offset.
We haven't paid
80-something
anything, so
million.
we don't get a refund.
Weren't we paying at one point? That's why we went into litigation?
Right, we were paying.
We
the
were paying at
stormwater
one
fee.
point in that time frame.
We were, and then we stopped.
Right.
Yeah.
So there may be some adjustment, but
Right.
certainly I can get with Attorney Powers and we can take a look at.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of people
Right.
that we need to
Yeah,
to
because
have in that
because
conversation.
You're going to get an invoice for that assessment that's different than your normal bill. So
Right.
that's why I want us to be very careful. I
And
agree
my
with
understanding
Mr.
of it,
Hall.
it's not necessarily attached to the refund. This is to pay for the actual lawsuit fees that they're having to, the millions that,
That they don't
and
have.
that's what this, right.
Correct.
Well, we typically put in 2, 3, 4% depending on who the vendor is, whether it's City of Ocala or some of the other vendors. So I would hope that we could absorb that this year, and they will budget accordingly next year.
Thank you.
This is my favorite spreadsheet here, and this is the FEFP calculation. On here, I just wanted to point out to you, we have over $100 million of categoricals. And you know what that means? We get that money, and that is the only thing we can spend it on.
Right.
It does not allow for much flexibility. It includes things like, we talked about the turnaround supplement, the teacher salary increase. Of course, there's class size and instructional materials and transportation. So those items, basically, they dictate how we spend them, but of course, they support our students. So if we can take a look at the general fund, our original budget was $352 million. And our budgeted revenue revised is 350, and I shared with you a little bit earlier that decrease is 1.65 million, and it's due to the property taxes as well as an FEFP adjustment from the prior year for the most part. And as you can see, local is 30% of our funds, and state is 67%.
Faustinonis, just for clarification for those listening, when you say adjustment, does that generally translate to reduction?
Yes, this is a reduction in our budget from, the original budget was 352.3 million, and it's reduced to 350.7 million.
Thank you.
I think I went too far. And this again is a snapshot of the expenditures, or his revenue. And then here's what we've actually collected. In case you're wondering, all of these funds are in line where we were 12 months ago. So everything is in line in terms of percentages received to date. The only area where we are probably behind is that second column, and that is federal through state, and that's Medicaid. We have a new team working on that, and we believe they will catch up by the end of the year to where our revenues should be where we budgeted or close. And again, under the local, the property taxes are, in December, we hadn't collected very much. And that's because payments occur between November and March for the most part. But it's all in line with what we're used to. Here's budgeted expenditures. The original budget was $370.5 million, and the expenditures increased about $200,000. And that's because of transfers from the internal account, donations, those type of things. The revenue is transferred, and also there is a budget that goes with it as well. If you look at our actual expenditures, everything again is in line. Budgeted expenditures, this is pretty much in line with the prior year, so nothing sticks out. That very last column, that transfer, that belonged to the pro share. Remember the balance that was in the fund balance? We transferred the pro share over to self-insurance.
Self-funded.
And that's what that represents. There's just a little bit left, and that's if we have Camp K. General fund has to transfer funds to food service to offset some of the costs of the food. Maybe about $14,000, $20,000 at the most. Just a reminder of fund balance, we're required to have 3%. Our auditors recommend between 5 and 7, and our credit rating agencies who are hovering over school districts in Florida, they recommended that we keep double-digit percentages. Keep in mind, we can't use these for recurring items because we don't know from year to year what they will be. We should be using these items for one-time events or specific projects, and it must be considered for financial stability. All those unforeseen circumstances that seem to happen all the time now. You know, one year it's the economy, the next year it's COVID. There seems like every year there's something that interferes with our economy, which again interferes with the funding that the state provides to school districts. So our budgeted ending fund balance right now is about 32.6 million, or 9.3%. Our original was 34.4%. What I do know is that this is where we are budgeted. We do know there are some things that have occurred or have not occurred during the year, which may increase fund balance, but at this point, the only thing that we know for sure is that we have vacancies from time to time. We have positions that have not been filled, so there is an opportunity for this fund balance to grow by the end of the year. If we don't spend all the funds, the categoricals, remember we have to roll them over to the next year. And what I mean by roll over is we don't have access to those restricted funds. They have to be rebudgeted in the next year, and that's something we've done forever and ever. But I believe that we're in a good position, and I believe that we're prepared if we do suffer reductions in revenue for this year, or if our revenue is decreased significantly for next year. And that'll be based on having a healthy fund balance. I'm not really sure what the governor is going to do. I'm not really sure what our legislators are going to do. So it just behooves us to be prepared for all those kinds of instances. But right now, we're in a pretty good position. If we'll move over to adult ed, we'll go through that quickly. I believe that's slide 15. Budgeted revenues, 8.3. The original budget was 8.2. And this increase is really due to aligning the revenue with the state for the workforce development funds that they receive. And then also there were additional funds in their fees that they collected from students. As you can see that their revenue collected is pretty much in line with prior years. It's about 44% of their budget has been collected at this point. Same thing with their expenditures. They're pretty much in line with what they have spent in the past year. The original budget was 7.9 million for expenditures, and now it's 8.1. So that's fairly reasonable. Last year, the adult ed had a deficit. This year, they are working very hard to maintain their revenues in line with expenditures, and also they have received some CARES funds as well, and they're making the necessary adjustments to make sure that we don't end up in that position next year, at the end of this year. Just a snapshot of their actual expenditures, and they are so in line with where we were last year in terms of percentages. And then their ending fund balance, as you can see, it's projected to be at 157,000, and we want to make sure that they maintain that by the end of the year. We'll move on to referendum, 21.6 million, and I want to put a pin right in here. Remember, next year we go into our third year, so we have to make decisions about where we go, whether or not we're going to go back to our taxpayers or whatever our plan is. We need to start thinking about that. But the budget is 21.6 million, a little bit down, again, adjusted for property tax value decrease as well. Our collection is in line with prior years at this time, and but only 37% has been collected. Again, that's due to tax bills November through March. So if we look at this in March, we'll see a spike, and it may be totally 100% by the end of March in terms of collections. Budgeted expenditures for referendum, 22.1 million, pretty much in line with the original budget. And this is just a picture to show you what the different programs are that support referendum, whether it's class size, physical education, vocational, art, And I also want to remind you that we have over 400 folks being funded out of this particular fund. Actual expenditures, 8.9 million. The professional development, they haven't spent much because most of their dollars are spent in the summer for mentoring as well as training our new teacher.
Ms. Postonellis, looking at the referendum dollars, the vast 51%, so more than half, is dedicated to class size reduction.
Yes.
What would we do if we didn't have the referendum because class size reduction is required?
That includes also paras as well, if you recall. It's the teachers and the paras. The easy answer would be we would have to fold those units into the general fund and make the adjustments that are needed. I mean, that's the quick answer, but it's much more involved than that. But the class size amount, again, includes teachers and paras. And I think you're all aware that we have begun attritioning out some of the paras. I mean, I'm hopeful that we will renew this referendum, but I think we've known all along that adjustments will have to be made if it is not renewed. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does answer my question, and the reason why I'm asking it is because I believe there was a time when, and I don't know if the rules have changed, but if a district did not meet class size reduction, then you got penalized.
Correct.
Right? And in those days, I think that was that when we used those certified subs and.
I think that was a part of it, but what happened is we paid penalties for a few years.
Right.
And I think one year it was almost $2 million that we had because we did not meet class size. So we will be required to meet class size regardless of whether the referendum exists or not. But my only point is that some of what we call class size includes paraprofessionals as well as teachers.
Right. Right. So you either reduce your class size or you pay the penalty, and the penalty dollar-wise is less expensive than meeting class size, but that's not what's best for kids.
I seem to remember, Chair Thor, that we paid some hefty money.
Yes, for several years.
For several years because we did not, and that was prior to referendum. So
Yep.
I'm thinking, as Ms. Ellis has said, this is something that we have to possibly, again, reach out to the community and have a serious conversation about this referendum because we're making it based on referendum.
So there's several steps we have to take. And so I would suggest very strongly that within this, before the end of the school year, that we have some workshop time to talk about what's required and the next steps.
Well, and I know we're talking staffing plan after you today, so I guess I'm kind of curious what the budget looks like without the referendum. So I think as we're going into that conversation, I think I would, as we're adjusting staffing plan potentially and what that looks like from an overall cost perspective, and then figuring out where the money comes from later. I mean, I understand not necessarily, but I'm kind of thinking out loud on this is how much money we have to have our classes so we're not paying penalties based on the number of teachers and paras that we need in each classroom that's the best for kids. What is that total number? And then working into how it's funded later. I'm sure that's how you do it. I haven't seen it that way.
Right. The staffing plan is based on meeting class size. And then it goes toward where are they funded? Partly out of referendum, partly out of the general fund. If you recall, we had art, music, media, and the PE, and we lost a half of a unit. So a PE teacher would work at 2 schools. The referendum allowed us to restore that unit to 1. So then we had the 1 art teacher, and this is just elementary. schools. So we would, again, not only have to look at the class size, which includes teachers and paras, but we'd also have to look at all of the other elementary units, art, music, media, PE, and then we have some vocational too, as well. But what you'll get from Ms. Dobbins is not looking at funding.
Right,
This is what we need
right.
to meet class size.
And keeping in mind, too, that the original referendum did not include school safety.
Correct.
Right.
That was added in after
This-
Parkland, after
Right, and it
Parkland.
did not include a lot of the units. We
Right.
started out with just under 200 units, and it just blossomed into over 440 units.
It was supposed to be a replacement, and it's
Right.
become quite the enhancement.
We did a lot of enhancing
Right.
because the money was available.
Right.
Also like to, when we do have this workshop, I would also like us to explore, like, would the referendum or would like a tax, because in the meantime, it's great that we've had these positions filled, but on the other side, we have our buildings, our classroom buildings that are aging, you know, every year and are starting to fall apart. So I think it would be best for us to assess everything and maybe look what would be best for the time now moving forward. So maybe we could just add that in there whenever we do have that.
And
Agree
it's
with
So
good
we
to
can explore
pre-plan
every
because
option.
we will actually have to do a study. If you're looking at some kind of a sales tax or anything like that, it's a requirement of the law as of last year.
How long does a study like that take? It seems like it would take I don't know.
Maybe a couple of months.
Yeah, so I
We have to
wonder-
basically justify why there is a need. And then again,
So-
it would have to go to the county commissioners.
They have their own tax right now.
So even if we renew the referendum but change some of the language on what it benefits, we have to go through that study. Is that correct?
No, it's
No,
very
if you're
different.
talking
Different
about a
tax.
sales tax.
Okay,
New-
okay.
Yeah,
So I
that's
was
why we
just
need
asking
to, we
if
probably
we
need to be stepped through it and discuss
within-
it greater.
Yes, so I would like to dedicate, you know, at least an hour or a whole work session so that we can really delve into this.
Yes, I agree. And I think we need to do it sooner than later because we have to figure out what our options are. Then we have to well, first we need to figure out what our ask is.
Right.
And then we need to figure out what our options are.
Right.
Because some districts do a half mil for operating and a half mil for, you know, capital. So, but we need to know what all our options are. And when the original referendum passed, it was only what, like 14 or 15 million dollars that it was bringing in?
And it grew.
And it grew, which is great. But, you know, so yes, I definitely agree that we need to have that work
Sometime in the
session
spring, Dr. Gullett will.
sooner than later.
And
Yep.
if you recall the sales tax that we had many, many years ago, we had an opportunity to renew it and we did not.
Right.
So, and that was a half.
Right, right.
Half
Yep.
percent.
Yeah, it was a different board, and we're just exploring, so we're informed and know what is best for this district right now.
Exactly.
They made that decision back then, because that was good for them then, but we
I
have
think it was
different-
the economy too.
Right, I was gonna say,
was
we
gonna
have
say,
different
yes.
scenarios. And I was thinking about, like, I remember in the beginning, we talked about rainy day funds all the time, but in case something happened, but as Ms. Bossanella said, it seems something's happening every year now that's unforeseen, so, yeah. Okay,
Okay.
I'll get off.
So I'll close with just budget challenges, which you are very aware of, fluctuation in enrollment, the use of fund balance, and costs associated with state mandates such as safe schools. I believe Dr. Gullett had asked for a security plan, and I think that's been finalized for the next, what we need to do.
Right.
And that's not cheap. And then, of course, costs associated with aging buildings, as Ms. King stated, that we have all those issues. They've been our issues, and they continue to be our issues and concerns.
Right.
Going away.
I'm sorry I don't have anything for third calc. I was really bummed about that, but,
Nothing you
make
can
it.
do about that.
pardon me.
Nothing you can do about that.
One more question.
Yes, yes, go ahead.
So the
Mr.
governor has asked for an increase in the required local effort for school districts, and I'm really hoping that the legislature will go along with that.
What I have heard about that is that the legislators want us to know that if we don't have the students next year, we probably won't get funded for those students. So The governor's bill is always, except for 1 year when Charlie Crist came in. And that first year he came in, he lowballed everything. But most governors' budgets are really good. And it's a baseline for legislators to start. But we don't need to cash that check until we see a little bit farther along. The session starts March, and I would think that you'll be informed daily about what's going on. We continue to follow the bills as well, and we'll see what happens.
Right. Ms. King, you had something
I
else?
do have one more question. Earlier, we talked about transportation and how that's a huge undertaking too, and it kind of looks like we might have gas prices that are going to be raised higher. What are we doing? How are we looking forward in case, like next year, we're talking gas is, $1 or $2 more? It may or
have
may
a
not.
bid.
What's unforeseen?
We have a bid
Okay.
for fuel, and of course, there is an uptick in a percentage increase based on what's going on in the economy. But that's how we pretty much streamline how we manage our fuel costs.
Okay.
By having a bill that commits the company to sell us the fuel at a certain price.
Okay. So we have that bid, but we're looking ahead. So in case the bid is higher next year, then that's what I was just asking, making sure we're forward thinking.
Right, it's a year-by-year bid?
Yes,
Yeah.
subject to renewals.
Okay. Thank you.
I got a question too, while we're on transportation. We just purchased some buses a few years ago. Didn't we have like a big payment that comes up or something?
Every year. It's spread out over 10 years.
It's for over 10 years.
Yes, we purchased 150 buses,
Right.
and the money that we borrowed will allow us even to buy additional buses during the year. So we probably are purchasing, based on the price, between 4 and 6 additional buses every year. But we went into that loan for 150 buses. So, but you're right, we can't just sit on that. We've got to continue to look at managing that fleet and ensuring that it's properly fitted for our students for safety.
I think I remember too that the newer buses are better on gas, let's hope so.
And repairs.
Right, and repairs. Yep. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bostonellis. Is there any public comment? All right, seeing none.
Madam Chair, may I make a comment if you don't mind?
Oh, gosh,
I
yes.
just, as a superintendent, I have to recognize under Ms. Bostonellis' leadership, and I know that you all recognize this as a board, the financial stability that we have in our district. I may say this all the time to her, but I want to say this publicly. I know that we all recognize the importance of that. Not all districts are as fortunate to have this leadership to make sure that we are good stewards of our funds and that we're planning ahead. So I just want to recognize the whole team under her leadership for that work.
Yes.
I second that.
I recognize your leadership.
Well-
Because we couldn't do what we do without your leadership. We couldn't do what we do without the just collaborative work with all the departments. And we appreciate that as well.
Yeah, well, as everyone working well together, as Dr. Gullett said, when you read the paper on what's happening in other districts, we're not in that position. And it is because of your leadership and your team and keeping the board informed. And it's been a joint effort, and it's a relief to know that we're not having to scramble such as other places do, and that we are, when we hear you say for next year we're in a good place, that's very relieving as a board member, so thank you. And that is to you and your leadership and your team.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
And we will bring back, Board Member McCall, the safety plan and all those pieces back during work session to bring all that data to the board.
So we can make really good decisions and that we have good information for our community on why we are going for it again.
Right, right. Yes, and before you take off, Ms. Bostonellis, when would be the soonest that you would have the information that we would need for a work session centered around a referendum conversation? Because we're obviously going to need, numbers and projections and things like that. And now that we've talked about it, I am very interested in getting that conversation going sooner than later. It's going to be honest before we know it.
If spring is okay. April, I've got to
Yeah.
get back with
Yeah.
other staff. and
April's
other
good.
departments.
Sure. Okay.
I think that's when we started the time frame last time.
Right.
And that gave us
Enough
the
time.
whole year prior to the vote in November to really promote it.
Yep.
Thank you,
Yeah.
April. If it pleases the board, I'm looking at April 8th is our work session. Do you want to include that as an agenda item for April 8th?
Don't you think?
Is that,
Yeah,
would you
but we need about a, but
Do we need a-
Or
we
do we
need
need
an
a
hour,
separate-
well, I think we need about an hour.
We
Huh?
can plan to stay late that day.
Yeah,
if
we can
need
stay
to.
late, yeah.
Is there a lot on that agenda?
we have charter school applications, annual review of our alternative learning, funding projection update with the self-funded health plan, code of student conduct review, and district emergency management.
Oh, that's pretty hefty already.
So it's already pretty long,
I think we need,
Brenda?
we don't need to we don't need to gloss over, we need to make sure
Separate.
we're,
Right, that we can get right in it.
because the community, we've got to make sure that we're
Well,
getting.
I wouldn't even mind having a special workshop just.
Just dedicated to
for-
this.
Just dedicated to this.
With you.
Yep. Yep. After spring break, and let's do it.
Sometime in April.
Yep.
And have plenty of time to advertise it, but I do think
It warrants it.
it warrants it.
Yes.
Because we have new board members who need to understand the history of it from the beginning so that they have a very good understanding of where we were, just the steps that had been followed.
You're absolutely right, Ms. McCall, because for it to, if we have to go that route, we're the ones that have to articulate
Yeah.
it to the community.
Yep, so the newer, the three of you especially. So,
Do you want to pick a date today? Do you want to table that for a later time?
we can pick a date.
We can pick a date.
Special work session.
And so, at least, if we're still looking at April, the non-school board meeting week is still that week. So if April 6th is the Tuesday, obviously we have that work session on the 8th, later that week.
Or we could do it on April 15th. That would be rather appropriate, don't you think?
Next day.
I don't mind adding a workshop the same week as the board meeting.
Well, the 15th is, oh,
That's our agenda review, but we could do it right after agenda review and start at 10 rather than, or start at,
Yeah,
That's a
Was the
good idea.
15th the day that we talked about having a, oh, that's for next year, never mind.
Kelly has a good idea.
but
Oh,
Go ahead.
well, actually, it was Ms. McCall. It was both of us, I think. What if we propose like doing it on a day of a board meeting, like on a Tuesday before, like earlier in the day or something? Does that make sense or no?
Yep, makes sense to me.
So that would be,
beginning in March, I will be teaching on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2:30 to 4 o'clock every Tuesday and Thursday, beginning in March.
well, then that will not work.
what about April 15th at 11?
Sound good to me.
Or 10.
Agenda review.
Oh, okay, 11.
I must have the calendar wrong.
Tax day, 11 a.m. What do you say?
That's fine.
I'm good.
Wait, hold on. 11, I'll have to be out by 12:30 because I have a Kid Central earlier that day.
We should be able to keep this to an hour.
To an hour and a half?
If it's an hour, yeah, I'll have to leave.
'Cause an hour might be a little short, an hour and 15 to an hour and 30 should do it, I would think.
Okay.
Okay,
April 15th
yep,
at 11, did I hear?
at 11.
Wonderful, we'll make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving forward to do we want to take a quick break? You guys, before we go into the staffing plan? Let's just say I would like to take a quick break.
Okay, we'll do that.
All right, we'll take a 10-minute break, and we're adjourning at 10:30. We'll reconvene our work session at 10:37 a.m. And we'll go ahead forward with the staffing plan. Good morning, Ms. Dobbins.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. First, I'd like to say thank you to each of you for your individual work and time in our briefings to discuss the school staffing plan. Keeping in mind today is part one of a 4-plan staffing process. So we are going to talk about the school staffing plan, and then we'll bring back to you later in future work sessions the summer school staffing plan. Summer school is going to take a little bit longer this year. Summer school staffing plan, that we have a committee working very hard to really enhance and expand our summer opportunities. And they need a little bit longer time to make sure we're building the best plan possible. We'll also bring back to you part 3, which is the district school support plan, which is all of those individuals that are on a work at the district, but they're assigned to schools, such as your psychologists, social workers, ESE specialists, and so forth. And then wrap it up with the district staffing plan, which is part 4. So you have on your desk, you have a green folder that is school staffing plan. Inside that green folder, you have pending board approval on February 23rd, the school staffing plan ratios that we've discussed previously. There are no changes to our last discussion. However, there were formatting to make it a little bit better print. Those were the only changes. These will be the staffing ratios that we will bring to you on February 23rd for board approval. Now that you've had time to see them, hear about them with the team, I'd like to open it up for discussions, questions, concerns.
Anyone care to start? Ms.
Well,
Campbell.
I, for one, I'm very excited about the work that you all have put in, and that this is very formulaic, and that it has rationale behind how each school is going to be staffed, and it's based on student volume and population, and that is how funding also comes to us. So I'm excited about the potential for this direction we're moving in.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just begin with that. You guys did an excellent job with this formulation that did come before us. And I also like the flexibility that each school will have some autonomy on being able to, there's like an area where they can kind of pick and choose what's important to them, what their school needs specifically. I think it was very well thought out, very organized. There's a plan, like if A, B, C, D, or whatever it was. I appreciate your leadership and due diligence and dedication. Also, you too, Mr. Vianello, back there in the back, and also taking the time to thoroughly explain what the plan is moving forward, so that if we did have questions or concerns, they were addressed. And you also gave us time to think about it and, ask questions or whatever through our district to, see where we're at. So thank you.
Thank you. If I could respond, I'd like to thank Dr. Gullett and her leadership. As you know, this looks uniquely different than what we've brought to you in the past, because it aligns with our vision and our superintendent's vision that we're following here. And the collaboration piece, I too have enjoyed this year's process. I enjoyed Mr. Vianella's leadership and pulling together our principals, collaborating on this. And although this is our next year's school staffing plan, we also know that we have an attrition plan that is a multi-year plan to get us where we need to be. But, today is significant. We're bringing you part 1 of part 4. And it's number 1, and it is our school staffing plan, and it is our priority. So, thank you.
And I will say, I agree with what my fellow board members have said. It is so easy to understand based on the numbers at the school. So, and Dr. Gullett, thank you for your vision and really taking this and really being strategic about what our schools need, involving your principals, and them being able to have input. So, and you answered so many questions of mine when we met with the team individually. So It's very easy to follow and very easy to read. I can look at all my schools and kind of know what they're going to have. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys sitting down with us one-on-one and going through this. It truly is very transparent in what is going forward. I think it's going to take away some of the angst that our school leadership has or has had in the past, but it also gives them some input and a role to play in who they have on their campuses and what they need. I love that form that you guys, I might be getting ahead, but I love the fact that they have the opportunity to justify their needs and to work it out. So I do have a question. How soon are we going to get this out to them so that they can start explaining it to them?
So that is my next topic. If we want to move into that, is what is our next steps?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I just want to give a little bit of input as well, because I am grateful for the partnership and for the culture and tone that we're creating. Ms. Keinert and Mr. Whitehouse, our elementary and secondary area directors, your work is tireless and endless, and it's very much appreciated, and just the whole collaboration has been wonderful. I acknowledge that volume and population is how we're funded, and the acknowledgement that every school is different and accounting for that is so important. And anyone that's gotten around to any schools knows exactly what I'm talking about. You know, an elementary school is not an elementary school is not an elementary school.
Right.
And same with middle and same with high. And so it's going to be a new way of work and a new way of thinking for our principals to really know and that it is A-OK and expected for them to honestly advocate for what they need, and that even though we may be looking at attritioning some positions, if they feel like they really need it for their school to be successful,
Yes.
they're not going against the party line, you know, by asking for that. And I think that's very important to say, because I continue to be concerned about attritioning kindergarten pairs. You know, if our kids are not well supported pre-K through second, then we know what happens in third grade. So having that flexibility from school to school to really be able to advocate for what they need and feel like it's going to be not just heard but happen, and creative ways to buy those positions if they're not part of this ratio is an important conversation to continue to have with our principals, and I know you'll do that. So that's, I think, why I'm excited about this, because it's covering two bases: the funding and the way it is, whether we agree with it or not, but then also the flexibility. And that's key to me. So thank you. Thank you very much. It's very direct. It's very straightforward. I like that.
And Madam Chair, if I may, for the members of the board, I want to thank the team, the entire team, because I set out a pretty high bar for them and said, we have to make sure that we're really transparent. I know we tend to overuse that word, but we need to be in the allocation of our resources to student need. The resources go where the student needs are, right? So we needed that, and we needed a very well-articulated process of identifying what those needs are and the allocation of this. So I've shared this with the principals and said that was the first step, and we still have some work to do. We will get there with some other additional funding sources side by side, so they can see, as an instructional leader at their site leader, what those resources are and how they align with the school improvement plan, and all of those pieces need to come together. So, and the flexibility was also important because year to year the needs of the students change. Gave the example of you may not need a dean, but you need a math coach, right? And having the ability to be agile in the allocation of personnel to meet the needs of those students needs to be and is the responsibility of a site-based leader. That's what we support them to do that work. So I think the whole team and the principal input was fantastic, but there is still some work to do on this, but this is our way of work of being much more clear about allocation of all resources. And I'll be very blunt and say, I told him it's not about who you know and who you call to get an extra person. We don't have the monetary ability to provide gifts. Money follows the student need, and we will be really clear to do that. So thank you for your input.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, Dr. Gullett.
All right, so here are our next steps. So tomorrow morning, Friday at 10 a.m., Mr. Vianella and I have a Zoom meeting with all principals, and directors are invited to that Zoom meeting as well. And we'll go over these ratios in more detail with our principals. And then we'll also talk about those request forms. So as you know, we have the exchange form where they can, just as Dr. Gullett mentioned, if they have a need for a content area specialist in math, that could be exchanged for that student service manager if there's a vacancy there. Again, we've got contract language that we have to navigate with certain things. And then also that form, that additional support form process as well, where they'll learn about that, where if there's a unique need or a unique circumstance and they feel that they have that need and the data and the return on investment to support it, they have a process to request that, and we as a district have a process to look at that as a committee and determine that whether that need is approved or not. From there, I will then distribute through the weekend, no later than 8 o'clock on Monday is my goal. I will have out to every school their draft allocation sheet, and that is their sheet that tells them they get this many units and so forth. It will also, it's different this year, and where we have identification on those sheets that this is an additional support unit for ESE reasons or for interventions reasons, or these are your units that will eventually attrition out as they become vacant or the vacancies occur across the district, so that therefore they know what's coming ahead in their planning and their structuring.
Ms. Dobbins, may I ask a question about that? Dr. Gullett, we know we're missing kindergartners this year. How are we accounting for what we think may enter into our kindergarten classrooms next year?
So our elementary principals are really creative and savvy, and what our area directors train them in are the tactics of, if you know you have a vacancy on your school, but you're not seeing that kindergarten enrollment coming in, there's nothing to say that you need to fill that unit right now. So they really wait to see those registrations coming in to see what their need is. If there is the need that raises up over the summer, okay, now I can move forward with going ahead and posting. All in all, when we get into that 10-day count, which is between the start of school and Labor Day, when we look at those counts, if we see dwindling enrollment, that's when we begin those involuntary transfers of teachers to fill other units. Speaking of that, we do the projections now. And so we have an idea, and then we go through our processes of hiring and getting to that job fair that we discussed. Then in April, our principals may get a new draft allocation, because that's when Mr. Ayers will finalize the school choice, and we know now where our students have chosen to go. We make those adjustments, we adjust the allocations, we push that back out to schools. Meanwhile, we continue any transfers that may happen due to that, and they're continuing in their hiring processes for next year. We then look at the 10-day count and we readjust again, and then we'll look at the October FTE and adjust again. And then we're then looking in our February FTEs toward the next school year, and it's just a fluid process that keeps going.
So let me ask this question. There is a very good possibility that many of those that should be in kindergarten this year are just not in school anywhere. What happens to that group of kids when they come to enroll? Do we automatically, because of their age, put them in first grade? Or are we going to put them in kindergarten? And I'm not real sure what the answer to that is, but I do know that that's kind of an aha, what are we going to do?
Yes, a great question, Board Member McCall. I think there are a couple of things. I want to back up to your first question and talk about that. In addition to what Ms. Dobbins shared, it's another reason for these partnerships, and we're working right now on an articulated agreement with Early Learning Coalition, and better sharing information of those coming to us. Where are those students, and what skills are they coming with, so we're better prepared, because we know that we need to really focus strongly on that. And then to those students who will come to us for the first time, and understanding that there are likely to be some big gaps, we will have to assess that. And I think, again, that's part of thinking outside the box. We'll have to do some early assessments of where they are. There are opportunities there to think a little differently about, without getting into a lot of detail, I think about kind of a flex model with a kindergarten, but maybe a grouping of students who need some early learning readiness skills, and so some ability to do some homogeneous grouping there. There's a lot of opportunities there to further investigate, but I think what we'll have to do is some early assessments to determine if there are some significant gaps. How do we address those gaps educationally? So we'll have to be flexible with that for sure. Absolutely.
That is a concern, and I think that some of those students that are missing are probably some of those kindergarten kids that we
Absolutely.
thought were coming and we just didn't come. Okay.
Absolutely.
A lot of times, we don't know that they're coming till the day that they register, but over the summer, with all of the plans that we're hearing about that are going to be exciting and cool, hopefully we can do some outreach too to encourage families, if they intend to enroll a young child, let's find out, let's meet them as soon as possible.
And the partnership with ELC is one that we have not had a strong partnership before, and I think Dr. Gullett's made very clear that that is going to be a strong partnership. And I think they can help us really help identify those kids. So I'm glad to hear you say that you're working with them.
And I hope in the future we would be able to provide opportunities to kind of an early start model. I hope that in the future we might be able to provide some opportunities for that to jumpstart them.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I also just need to make one acknowledgement as well, Dr. Hembrook, that's the one hard part about Zoom, is that you're sitting in our virtual world quietly, and I didn't acknowledge you as our elementary area director, and Melissa Kiner does our transformation, and then Mr. Whitehouse is secondary, so my apologies for that. We see you.
So she got something else going on, because the dog just want to stay in the car.
Dog.
She keeps leaning over trying to block it. She's messing with her hair and stuff, but he's in the camera, so just let him be the dog. Just let him be the dog.
That's teleworking.
Okay, thank you all.
All right, with all of the discussion, if we're in a good place, do we need to place this item? It's tentatively scheduled on the February 18th board work session. Do we need to bring the school staffing ratios back? Or can we remove it from that work session? Wonderful.
I'm very comfortable with what I see here.
Then looking forward, we'll look to do the district school support staffing plan in March, starting on March 4th. As long as we're ready, again, we are charting new territories with how we present this, and so we want to do it in the best light and the best transparency and with our best foot forward. So we're hoping that will be March 4th for that staffing plan. We are working very hard in that committee for the best summer school plan, and so we are changing our work session needs to possibly April 8th, which I heard earlier is a pretty tight work session, but we're going to need to look at that summer plan as well, and then our district plan will follow along those lines as well. And that's all I have for today.
Thank you so much. Yes, we'll do whatever we need to do.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts.
Yes, thank you. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move forward with recommended instructional materials for adoption for ELA. Ms. Leeds, good morning.
Good morning, Board Chair Thrower, board members, Dr. Gullett, Attorney Powers, Ms. Prestopino. This morning I wanted to go over with you our instructional materials, where we are with the process, and present to you the superintendent's recommended titles for adoption. So we opened up our call for publisher submissions on October the 26th. We let that call remain open until November the 13th. We put the call out to all publishers through EdCredible, which is the digital instructional materials evaluation platform that we've been using in Marion County for the past several years. Since we started using it, the state is also utilizing that platform, so publishers are able to be notified through that platform directly. With our call for that submission, we did notify publishers that Marion County Public Schools would only be reviewing materials that were going to be submitted to the state. So with that being said, we did receive back submissions from 5 elementary publishers and a total of 8 secondary publishers, which encompassed all of the publishers that did submit to the state, with the exception of 1 publisher on the elementary side that did not submit to us, but did submit to the state. In November, on the 16th, we did have an evaluation team at the district level formed. That evaluation team was comprised of members from the Curriculum and Instruction Department, from ESE, from ESOL, and from our Technology Department. That committee was broken into an elementary and a secondary committee. And what they did was they came together to review those materials through that EdCredible platform to ensure that we were in compliance, that we were going to be meeting standards, that we'd be able to connect with technology, that those materials would be able to serve our students in ESE, and that those materials were providing support to our ESOL students. From there, those committees did then make recommendations for materials to be moving forward, and so I'd like to share with you those materials that move forward to our actual adoption committee for review. So as I shared, we had the 5 elementary and the 8 secondary. Those were narrowed down. We had a total of 3 publishers that moved forward to be evaluated by our adoption materials committee. And so the 3 on the secondary side were HMH, McGraw-Hill, and Savas Learning Company. And we had 2 publishers that were moved forward for elementary, and that was HMH and Savas Learning. So a reminder of what our adoption committee was made up of. Each of the committees were made up of a total of 15 members. You, as the board members, were able to appoint community members to our adoption committee, so it would have made up a total of 5 members from the community for each of those committees. We were allowed to up to 2 parent members that would have to apply through an application process, and then also 8 teacher members that were also required to apply by application process also. So that's what made up our adoption committees that reviewed these materials. So the timeline for that adoption committee, on January the 14th, we opened up the opportunities for those members of the committees to review the materials through EdCredible. And they also had the opportunity to come to the professional library to review those materials in person and the actual hard copies as well. So they had both the digital access that both teachers and students would be seeing, as well as the opportunity to view the materials in person. They had access to those materials until January the 27th. So while they were in the midst of their review, we did have a community review night that took place on January the 25th. The community review night took place from 6 to 8, but I will tell you that we did also want to make sure that we opened up an opportunity for principals to also provide their input on the materials. So an opportunity for principals and assistant principals was provided on that same evening. We opened up a special time just for them. They were allowed to come in from 3 to 6 without being interrupted with public members coming in, so that they could have those collaborative conversations amongst themselves about those materials. The administrators were asked to provide feedback on a recommendation form on the materials, whether they would or would not recommend those materials to be put forth for adoption, and not only that, but which of those products they would recommend if they were recommending them. On January the 28th, our adoption committee came together at Westport High School. They were provided all of the information that was received from the public review night. They also received all of the feedback from the principals and APs that came that night also and provided their recommendations. They also reviewed all of the materials that were put together from the evaluations from the individuals on EdCredible. All of that data was pulled down from EdCredible for those individual reviews so that the committee as a whole could see what that information was. And then finally that evening, they were able to cast their vote for their recommendation that would be presented to Dr. Gullett. So a quick glimpse of this review process. So the materials were ultimately reviewed as individuals by the Adoption Review Committee, and then they came together as a group to review their feedback as individuals, as well as the information that came back from the community and our administrators. At that point, they did vote and came up with their recommendation to provide to the superintendent. The superintendent has taken all of that information into consideration in making her recommendation for the titles. And that is in alignment with Board Policy 4.21 that does state that the Adoption Committee is to make a recommendation to the superintendent and for her to take that into consideration before making her recommendation to you. So with that being said, I will say that Dr. Gullett has considered that information and is moving along with the recommendation from the Adoption Committee. And so the Adoption Committees, along with Dr. Gullett, have recommended that for K2 and 3-5 ELA, they are recommending Savas Learning Company with the book title Florida My View Literacy. On the middle school side, they are recommending grade 6-8 ELA, Savas Learning Company, Florida My Perspectives. And on the high school side, both the groups for 9-10 and 11-12 are also recommending Savas Learning Company, Florida My Perspectives. As you'll notice on each of these slides, there are alternates that were provided. As I've shared with you previously, we are still waiting for a state adopted list to come forward so we would know what was actually adopted by the state. It is the expectation of Marion County, along with the guidance of Dr. Gullett, that we are going to be adopting state adopted materials. So without that list, we could not definitively say that the number one recommendation would be the one that we would be going for. So the alternate that is provided is that one that came in a second place with the votes, so that if Savas Learning Company is not on that state adopted list, that we do have another title that we can move forward with without having to go back to an adoption process, which, as we all know, will take several months to get taken care of. So our board process, where we are right now, as of today, February 4th, is our presentation to you to provide you Dr. Gullett's recommendation of the adopted materials for ELA to be implemented as we're moving forward with our implementation plan for 2021-2022. From here, from today, we will have a 20-day online public access, which is required by Florida statute. So following our meeting today, I will be working with our technology department to have that posted on our website so that that is available to our public. They will have access to the student editions for both the primary title that was recommended as well as the alternate title as well. On March the 9th, we will have a public hearing to be able to hear public comments at your board meeting on those recommended titles. At the board meeting for March the 23rd, we would look for school board approval on those recommended titles. At that point in time, that opens up our 30-day formal objection window that is required by Florida statute. That brings us to May 11th, where we would hear any potential formal objections on those materials. If there are none, then we can move forward with everything moving forward for the following school year.
This leads just a quick question on the next steps chart. Is it the same for any textbook adoption, math, civics?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, this is a great chart. Thank you.
So as I said, the public access will open up following our meeting today. It will be on our district homepage under the important informations area. And there will be a link for them to click on, and we'll open up a document that will look just like this that provides them step-by-step instructions on how to access each of the publishers' information. Each publisher has different ways of accessing it with different passwords and such. So all of that information will be provided for grades K through 12. And that's where we're at right now with instructional materials.
One question. I am assuming, because they have not come out with the state adoption list yet, that everybody on that list is going to be aligned with the new Florida standards. Is that correct? I would hate to purchase anything and not have it aligned with the new Florida standards.
Absolutely, and that's why, I mean, we won't be able to move forward until after our entire process is done in the middle of May as well. I have been in contact with the state as well, and they are running neck and neck with us. They actually have opened up their window to accept public comment on February 1st is when they open that up. So you can see we're very much in alignment with their adoption process. So I would anticipate that their list is probably coming out right about the time that we're finishing up our process here in Marion County. I've also been in conversation with other districts, and we're all pretty much neck and neck, right in the same process. And everybody's asking the same question as you all, Ms. McCall. We have had that team that came together from the district evaluation team. They spent a lot of time digging in to check on the alignment for the new Florida best standards. And that was part of the concern with some of the publishers that did not move forward for review, was that we weren't quite confident that they were definitely going to be in alignment with Florida best standards. So they did their absolute best in trying to make sure that what was provided to our adoption committee, that we're pretty confident that it will be, but obviously we're not making that decision for the state, but that was most definitely taken into high consideration in this decision-making process.
Madam Chair, if I may, Board Member McCall, great question. And we've had quite an extensive conversation about this along the way. And I want to thank Ms. Leeds and her team. It's a very tedious process. And so there are a lot of resources out there that are aligned, right? But we are looking for the most rigorous approach to those standards, right? We look at our data, they need to be rigorous. And so there's a lot of alignment. So alignment tends to be overused, and I'm looking beyond alignment to what's going to provide those grade level access points, right, to challenge our students in the rigor that they need. So, and our area directors are here as well, because it's critically important that we're hearing from those who are using our curriculum materials of what it's going to be of most value. You want to talk a little bit more about some of this? We've talked about some of those conversations. We've had those about alignment and what you're seeing, and the vertical articulation piece as well. I think if you could mention that. We talked about the ability to align better vertically with some of the resources that and the recommendation of this from K through 12.
So as far as the comments from the, okay, so.
Yes, and the alignment of the resources and the feedback of the team it being throughout. Mr. Whitehouse. That's what we're talking about.
So I know, just speaking as a former principal and somebody who works with our principals, the ability of us to use similar text between, especially our secondary schools, but even within schools, 9, 12, in the high school setting, because we have a lot of flexibility in teachers and movement from course and subject, having familiarity with rigorous content and course materials, and we're not constantly shifting and having to learn new curriculum formats, new materials, new online resources, it's very beneficial. So personally, I'm very pleased to see that our committees selected the same company moving through secondary education 6 through 12, because I think that's going to better align what we're doing as a group, and our students will be much more familiar with access to those resources as they progress through the grades, moving middle through high school.
Excellent.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Madam Chair, my question may be a little preliminary, but obviously with the entire state being in this language arts curriculum adoption process, availability is a question that I have, and so I'm just curious if that ever came up with this publisher, if they know they have stockpiles of these ready to go. I mean, frankly, we know that technology, we were excited to have orders for Chromebooks that were on back order forever, and so availability is a question for me.
Good question.
So, when we put out the call to publishers, we do put out in that call approximate numbers that we would be looking for. So we do notify them up front of what that potential would be that we would be looking for. At this point in time, after today's meeting is when I will be contacting the publishers to let them know where they are with recommendation. We can begin having those conversations now so that they could start making those plans. We don't wait until the middle of May to call the publishers and say, okay, now we need, 40,000 English language arts books. And we'll start having those conversations now so that they are ready to be able to provide us what we need to provide when we need it.
Good, thank you.
And Ms. Leeds, you said that the state was pretty in line with us, so when do you really think they're going to come out with that recommended list? I mean, because that could be, that plays a role in this. We don't want to tell them 40,000, they get started, and then they're not even on the list.
Correct. So statute is 20 days of open for public comments. And so, like I said, they just opened up their public comment window on February the 1st. So they're right in alignment with us. We open our window as of today with the 20 days, so we're literally just a couple days. I would expect that their list would be released right at the end of May at the latest, that we could have that information. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
They know that everybody is waiting. We're all in the same situation.
Yeah, and it's not in our control, unfortunately.
Right. But that goes back to Ms. Campbell's question is, if it's not till the end of May, and then let's say 80% of the districts choose exactly what we're choosing, what is the accessibility? I agree with that.
Who gets first dibs?
Yeah.
Well, as I said, we do notify the publisher ahead of time, so they do start working on that. And with that being said, Savas Learning is one of the big three major publishers of materials, and so I'm quite confident that they will be able to provide us the materials that we will need here in Marion County, as long as they do ultimately land on that list that enables us to be in compliance with spending our allocation.
I must say, it does seem strange for the list to come, the approved list to come after. It seems out of order to me.
It is.
No
but
kidding.
I know, but that's the thing, where it's out of our control. So that's why I just think it's important for us to focus on what we can control, and we are doing that. And I have enough faith in you guys to think that if those books are not in our hands immediately, I think you guys are resourceful enough to get us, until those books are in our hands.
Right, and I know we've discussed before, obviously that actual component in our hands is very, very powerful, but the digital component is really something that can be in the hands of our students and teachers much quicker than we can get those hard copy materials here. So as soon as we have a go to move forward, we will already be working with technology. And Savas Learning is also the publisher that we already have connections with our technology department for secondary math. And so it's not a new publisher for our district to have to work with for connections. They will connect seamlessly with Canvas. So as we move forward potentially with utilizing Canvas, that will open up a whole another opportunity of resources for our teachers and students. So we've already had those conversations as we were going through this adoption process to make sure that all of that could be streamlined. We didn't need any other barriers coming in our way to make sure, because we knew we were running short in a very short timeline to get this all turned around.
I'm hearing too that rigor, vertical alignment were two big factors. Was there anything else specific that caused these curriculums to rise to the top for your committees? I'm familiar definitely with, the Hope Mifflin. I'm familiar with McGraw-Hill, but Savas is one I'm not as familiar with.
Savas is actually a company that broke off from Pearson. So
Okay.
Pearson-based products. Pearson is based out of the UK, and the direction that they were going was more in a direction to provide what the needs were in the UK. They're more in a focus on digital and not so much on hard copies. And here in the US, they know that there are a lot of areas that cannot go strictly digital. So Savas knew that they could not provide for their customers here in the United States in that fashion. They decided to break off and be separate from Pearson. So they were Pearson, and they are now separate. They do continue to service CTE books through Pearson, and they do continue to service AP materials as well under Pearson. But other than that, they are strictly going to be K-12, but they come from under Pearson.
I see. So it was also availability of hard copy textbooks that was a consideration. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. If I might add as well, so I've had the opportunity to be able to serve on the Best Standards Committee several of the teachers on the elementary side as well as the secondary side that are on our committee. Ms. Leeds is on there as well as Mr. Whitehouse. Actually served on the ELA textbook review process committee. So we've been asking them some very strategic questions of, what did you like best about the ones that rose to the top? I will tell you for elementary, what I've heard loud and clear is there is a strong phonics piece. There's the decodable reader piece that we are lacking here in our district in elementary. There's a strong professional learning component with it, in addition to the rigorous content that is going to be now available to our teachers as they look towards the standards and to be able to utilize these resources to meet the needs of our students. So hearing that straight from the teachers made my administrator teacher heart happy to hear that that's what's going to be in front of our students when we receive the materials.
And Madam Chair, if I may, could you all speak about what we discussed about reaching all learners in the feedback and reaching all, thank you for that, Ms. Kennard, but all learners.
Right, so when we did open up this process, I do want to emphasize that in the training portion, I did emphasize that everybody that was on the committee obviously was selected based on their areas of expertise that they were able to come to the table with, and that was very important. But that they were a voice that was going to represent not themselves, not their specific school, not their specific classroom, but they were going to be representing all of Marion County Public School students, and that was something I emphasized continually through those trainings. So as they were going through and evaluating those materials, as I shared, the district evaluation team did look at our ESE support within these products as well as our ELL support in these products. And that was also clearly identified that our adoption committee folks were also looking for that as well. There was also some very in-depth conversation about the representation of the authors that were included in the books. There was one particular publisher that the committee felt that the authors that were represented were far too heavy on the elderly male population as authors and not as many female authors. And so that was a very big topic of conversation in our secondary adoption committee. So they were very adamant about looking at it in many different ways to represent everybody.
Because I think about, our foundational textbooks being able to stand the test of time, and we spend so much money on textbooks, and then we change, and then we spend so much money again, and it would be great to have our foundational texts, be able to stand the test of time. And I know time marches on, but, reading and so forth. And I know we have supplemental materials to target student needs, more fully. But I think that that's something that's really important also for us to keep in mind, that we just want good, solid textbooks, online or hard copy. So, gosh, you guys have really done your due diligence, it sounds like, and thank you for providing the detail, and especially the inclusion of the school principals, the ones that are living it and teaching it, and the teachers. That's definitely a great direction that you've gone in, and it's appreciated. Anybody else?
I just want to know if Dr. Gullett, have you heard anything about the adjustment in the textbook adoption calendar at all?
No, Board Member McCall, I have not. We've had the conversation regularly with state, and we're proceeding with the information we have.
I remind everybody that if the calendar stays the way that it is for adoption, we'll be $1.6 million in the hole, basically. We are $1.6 million shy textbook-wise. If the calendar stays where it is for adoption.
Hence my question earlier. It's for something as foundational as what we're talking about. Again, the progression seems strange to me. But anyway.
Thank you, Dr. Gullett.
Yes. Thank you very much. All right. Appreciate all of you. Is there any public comment? I guess there'll be plenty of time for that too in your timeline. Okay, we'll move on to COVID-19 updates with Dr. Hembrook. Oh, She's been here the whole time.
Until she's called on.
That's right.
Then we need to minimize her.
Good morning, board members, Chair Thrower and Superintendent Gullett. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. My colleagues and I, we wanted to share with you some of our updates regarding school operations and functions to do what's best for students, but still keeping in mind our reopening plan. So I'll start with sharing that on January the 29th, I reconvened the Health and Safety Committee to discuss 3 topics in particular. And those 3 topics were volunteers on campus, playground equipment, and also field trips. And so my committee met, and we also had a representative from the DOH. So the meeting started with a representative from the Department of Health sharing our current statistics regarding COVID-19 cases. And we also compared where we are today with those numbers in our community, and we compared that to where we were back in July and August. And we know that there's been an increase, right, since then. The next thing that we did as a committee was we reviewed what our current reopening plan states regarding those 3 topics that we were talking about. So volunteers and visitors on campus, we reviewed what we had written and agreed upon. We reviewed the procedures about field trips during the pandemic, and then also the use of playground equipment. And so the first topic that we spoke about in that meeting was volunteers. There was great conversations. I will share with you that the committee, we were mixed at the very, very beginning. I think there's still some concerns about allowing different individuals on campus because we don't know where they've been. We're concerned about the risk that might give our students and our staff, and the risk to the district as well. However, we also realized the importance that some of these volunteers provide to our students. And it was very clear in our conversation that we were really talking about 2 different things at this point. We were talking about elementary volunteers and secondary level volunteers because the needs of the students are quite different at those levels. And so when we started talking about volunteers at the secondary level, some specific volunteers came to mind. And so some of those would be like military recruiters, which you've probably heard about, and CTE personnel that come and do different activities with students to help promote that particular career field and job expertise. And those are people that have that expertise, so it's important for our secondary students to hear from them. We also talked about what would this look like if we permitted volunteers on campus, and what would parents feel? How would they feel if their children were interacting with different individuals? And so before you today, I'm going to share with you what the recommendation is. The recommendation for elementary is just to keep it as it is right now. So our recommendation at the elementary level is not to permit volunteers on campus. They can still support us in a virtual environment or capability if that can work with the school. But this time, that recommendation to you is that volunteers are not permitted at the elementary level. The recommendation for the secondary level is to permit and allow certain volunteers. And the caveat of that, we kind of defined what that would look like. The volunteers would be those that are necessary to carry out some type of activity that was related to an educational experience for the students at that secondary level, or to help that student make future choices about post-secondary education opportunities or career opportunities, to include some CTE personnel as well as military recruiters. The committee did feel that a subcommittee, with your approval of this recommendation, a subcommittee should be developed to really more narrowly identify exactly who those particular volunteers would include. Any of those volunteers would still be required to adhere to our current visitor policies, which includes that they have to have a scheduled appointment, and they can't be late to those appointments. They would still go through the screening questionnaires at the school level, and they would be their temperature would be checked upon entry. Some things that we need to think about what that would look like for schools too is that the schools would have to provide a visitor escort, so they would have to provide a staff member to be with that volunteer at all times to ensure that we are maintaining social distancing and that that volunteer is wearing a face covering at all times per our current resolution. The committee also recommended that parent permission should need to be obtained for their particular students to interact with the volunteer, and the committee felt that the volunteers should maintain a distance of 10 feet away from students at all times. So that recommendation is before you. So it would look very differently. So the idea of military recruiters in the cafeteria, that it won't look that way this year, but at least the recommendation is to provide that opportunity for students. And then the last two recommendations are actually about the playgrounds. And I wanted to clarify I think there's some misunderstandings here. So our playgrounds right now are open, but the structures themselves, the jungle gyms, the swings, those are currently closed because we needed to figure out how would we disinfect them in between cohorts of classes. The recommendation is that at this time we keep that the same. Children are still going outside and playing outside at recess. They're running around on the field with each other. But right now we recommend that we keep those playground structures closed. However, with your approval, I would be happy to form a subcommittee of elementary principals. This mostly impacts elementary, to talk about what would that look like if we could open it. I was able to have some funding available to actually purchase the sprayers to clean the equipment, but there was a big discussion on who would be responsible for that and how often would that need to happen. And so the committee really felt that principals would be able to answer that the best. And so I'm happy to form a subcommittee to help develop a plan for playground use and sanitizing in between. And then the same recommendation was for field trips as well. We recommended that right now we keep our current policies for field trips, but then have a subcommittee of principals, both elementary and secondary, and get them to weigh in on the possibility of adding field trips at a later date. And so that's the update that I have for you for the Health and Safety Committee for COVID-19 updates.
Thank you, Dr. Hembrook.
I was on the committee for this and on the call. And Dr. Hembrook, thank you and your group for all that you guys put in there. I know one thing we kind of talked about, because there was some discussion about would these people be volunteers or visitors, and we talked about the term necessary visitors. You remember that conversation that we had? And so we were trying to figure out exactly who needed to be on campus to see kids, and the thing was, we know at the secondary level, high school, there are some people that need to get on campus to see these kids, kids ordering caps and gowns and things of the such, and making sure that they had that access to those people. And so that's why we kind of thought about the term necessary visitors. And because a volunteer doesn't have to be escorted, visitors will need to be escorted. That was the logic behind that. And we went into depth about those playgrounds. Who's going to sanitize those playgrounds? And Mr. Lepper was there. And the thing was, we've added so many different duties to different staff members to add another task onto someone to sanitize those playground equipments, whether it be the custodians, whether it be the teachers, whomever. The team just felt like it would be excessive at this point. And we also took into consideration the numbers where we are based on from August to now. And we were actually right about around the same or a little bit higher than we were in August when we came up with certain protocols for opening schools. That's how we get to this situation. So they did a very good job, very good job. Thank you, Dr. Hembrook and your team.
Thank you.
Dr. Hambrook, thank you. The elementary volunteers, and I understand why the committee did what they did. I just know that in some cases, those volunteers are crucial to help with our kids. I think of Reading Pals. I know they're doing it virtually. I don't want this to, I want us to look again as we look at the numbers. I would love to see us be able in some fashion to get our elementary volunteers back into those schools. They are crucial a lot to some of our lowest children, to have them there to help. And I really want us to try to address this again. We know there's going to be some type of a state assessment. We don't know how they're going to use it yet, but a lot of times those volunteers, they're really working with our lowest kids. And so when we can, I'd like to address it again and see if we can't get them back in our elementary schools. They're just vital to the function of the elementary schools.
Oh, yeah.
So I understand where we are right now. I can accept that right now, but I'd really like us to really reconsider our elementary volunteers in the next few weeks.
And I think, Ms. McCall, it is kind of open to reopen it and look at it again. I think the biggest deterrent on that was just where we are with the numbers. It wasn't everybody just like, no. It was more like where we are.
And I can accept it for now, but as you know, the numbers hopefully will begin to go down the more people are vaccinated, and I'd like to be sure that we can get those volunteers back in. I mean, they're committed to those schools and they're committed to those kids. And we've got, for example, Stanton Weirsdale has that wonderful closet and pantry, and the volunteers help run that. I mean, there's survival needs that also go on with some of our volunteers to help our kids. So I really, really want to reconsider that. In the next week or so, if the numbers start going down, let's really look at that again.
Dr. Hembrook, again, thank you for your overseeing this work on this. I'm going to second what Ms. McCall said, but I also have a concern with timeline. At this juncture, we're, week 4 or 5 of this third 9 weeks, and I heard you mention twice subcommittees, which means we're still delaying what we're potentially, if we, the decision at some point needs to be made, and I'm, as we, especially for secondary volunteers or necessary visitors as we're calling them, as we move into April and May, we're talking testing, we're talking all kinds of things that these folks actually need to be in the schools in February and March, in my opinion. So I'm concerned about a timeline. Additionally, how that subcommittee would choose who those necessary visitors would be is a little questioning to me. I mentioned in the previous board meeting or work session that there are 2 middle schools right now, 2 gifted teachers that are looking for youth philanthropy in action to come back to their classrooms, and we're working on scheduling that right now. Those might not qualify as necessary visitors on the evaluation that you potentially are using. However, those are volunteers that come in and teach a curriculum that is unique, that is only taught by those folks and is specialized for those classes. Would love to open that up to more gifted classes within middle schools, but right now there are 2 specific that are looking. So those are just my concerns right now. I'm not certain who would be chosen to then be the screening folks to say you qualify and you don't. And then also on the timeline, if we're pushing this off to subcommittee to make some decisions, then we're really pushing into the 4th 9 weeks where we're really into testing at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Board Member Campbell. So actually, I already have an email drafted. I'm just waiting for you guys to let me know that I can pursue that. The individuals have already been identified. Many of them include those that were on the Health and Safety Committee, and then I did include some CTE district people and then some middle school principals as well that have some of those special options. The subcommittees can happen virtually, so they can happen pretty quickly. So, but I definitely also wrote down your question about that particular service that for the gifted classes that you mentioned. And I think that's the big conversation that we had too, was what work needs to be done on campuses that can't be done virtually. Some things can be done virtually, and that's what that committee would help identify.
Thank you.
Ms. King.
Yeah, I like the word necessary visitor rather than the volunteer. When I heard that, I was like, that's a pretty good word. And I also heard some good verbiage, for example, 10 feet away and wearing mask. What came to my mind immediately is lots of times we have a hard time with our employees wearing their mask correctly. How are we going to enforce that the visitors are going to wear their masks correctly? You know, like not below the nose or whatever, because what I see is risk worth reward here, you know. And right now, again, we're in a pandemic where we never know like who it is going to affect very severely, and sometimes even death, you know. And I hate to say that, but that's how it is. So I heard the mask thing. How would we enforce that in the high schools? I am not in agreement with elementary students at this point having reading pals. I love reading pals. I've done it for a few different years, but those that are familiar with reading pals, you have your books and your student is beside you, and it's for 30 minutes, you know. And so if we're going to enforce social distancing, it would have to be your reading pal. They're 6 feet away. You know, all these students, how do we have the space to utilize that correctly? Also, how would we even inform our parents? Because as a parent, if my student is reading with somebody out in the community that's coming in and sitting beside them for 30 minutes or maybe even more that week, you know, how are these parents informed? And then just safety reasons. And then when I look at just this week alone, we'll have one student or a teacher or an employee test positive for COVID, and we're taking out entire classes. So when I look at the broader picture and I think of the volunteers coming in, and if they brought in the virus when they exposed our students or vice versa, I'm not sure at this point, you know, again, risk versus reward. I love our volunteers, and we do need them in our schools when we're a healthy school. But right now, we're not a healthy district. Our numbers are still high. I'm still seeing classrooms that are being closed down, and I'm not comfortable with that, but that's where I stand.
This is the painful part of a pandemic, you know. Sadly, we can't think in terms of what we would like to see happen during typical times. And we want to be as typical as we can and provide as many opportunities as we can, because we know that's what's best for kids, typically. But, you know, we all get those emails, or we got quite a few texts yesterday about someone testing positive and 16 kids out. And so that's a struggle, you know, and I do think about how any time a classroom has to be shut down, the ripple effect that creates, especially across the families that are trying to work through this and everything else. I'm also thinking about the fact that, just looking at some very recent statistics as of today, the median age for people being positive has gone down to 43 years old. So this isn't just the elderly. At this point, this virus is changing and it's morphing, and I think we're at over 8% positivity as of today. And again, this is a painful part of a pandemic. We're having to really face this now, and not that we haven't been facing it before, but can it just go away already? We've been dealing with this for a long time, and now we're looking at the high stakes things. We're looking at volunteers continuing to be restricted, maybe even through the end of the year. We're going to have to make tough decisions about graduation. tough decisions about prom, grad bash, all of those things. And it's feeling very weighty to me right now. I'm sure to all of us. And I think about the actual practice of being in school and trying to maintain 10 feet apart. We're going to have to be pretty, and our decisions affect the ones that are actually doing the work, right? So that's why I do like the idea of subcommittee convening quickly and get some more information about, because kids need to be outside, people need to be outside. That's good for mitigating the virus and playgrounds and running around. Everybody has been so sequestered at home. I would like to know if there's procedures we can put in place to open up those avenues for our kids. I think it's really important for our older kids. I could see as far as recruiters and things, I could see that as being set up in a pretty safe manner. You were talking about the philanthropy, youth philanthropy in action. If they were towards the front of the room, that would be a very controlled environment with very controlled kids. But the parents would, in my mind, would have to be notified ahead of time, and they should be able to opt out if they don't feel comfortable. Having volunteers on our campus, yes, gosh, we love them and we need them, and it just feels so weird to be wanting, but by needing. This isn't a want thing, this is a need thing. Restricting visitors. I know for me, I'm not getting out as much because what do they need one more person on their campus that isn't necessarily essential? So I weigh that heavily. So I guess, Dr. Hembrook, for me to sum up, I will say that I'm a fan of the subcommittees because I think that we need to look at every opportunity that we can, that makes sense for the times that we're living in to provide opportunities for kids. And this is not a time for people to then say, well, you picked her, but you didn't pick me. Good God, this is a pandemic. We're trying to make the best decisions that we can, and we want to make sure our decisions don't adversely affect the ones that are going to have to carry them out. So those are my thoughts.
So, Ms. Sir, please note, I'm going to accept the committee's recommendations. I like the idea of the subcommittees. I just want us to be aware that if the numbers go down significantly, I really would like for us to address it. But as of right now, I don't disagree with any of the recommendations.
And there was another thing, when they talked about these necessary visitors, it was pertaining to folk that, visitors that could influence or affect these kids academically, their future.
As citizens too.
Right.
That's what I see about the youth philanthropy in action.
Right. So that's why that was, those conversations were had and deeply thought about. So that's kind of how we got to, let's figure out through these subcommittees who would be a necessary visitor and how it would affect those kids.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I do think sometimes there is, but it, like Ms. Thurber said, it is controlled. I was hearing a plan and controlled. I understand, look, I was a reading pal. I understand how that works, and what it looks like. And so that's why,
yes.
And unfortunately we are in a pandemic, and they're saying there's 2 other variants that we know of already out there, and so now is not the time for us to become relaxed or COVID fatigue or whatever we call it. Now is when we just can stay strong and dig deep, and we got it in us. We just keep on pulling so we all can be, safe and well and here and educated the best that we can. And, that's where I'm at.
There was one more thing too that I definitely have to say, that this group in discussion, they talked about where we are as far as how well we have done since we opened school. And the consensus out of that committee was we've done well and been able to stay in school because we had so many protocols in place and have been able to mitigate. But they just felt that if we got too loose, that we would have more interruptions and we need to keep kids in school versus out of school.
I respect their decision.
I just want to speak to just a couple of things. One thing about masks being mandated and the fact that they would have to be ensured that they were worn properly. I've been a part of large gatherings in a middle school recently where the principal walked through and said, if you don't get the mask up, you're leaving. And so, and that has been enforced and was happening. And so I don't really have as much concern, because if the teacher is the designated staff person that the necessary visitor is with, then they will be the one that polices that. And I don't think that they'll have a problem with that. They're policing it of their own students every day. But I also wanted to mention the two headlines I thought that were interesting in either today or yesterday's newspaper. I think this morning's headline was that 1,400 people were vaccinated in 24 hours in Marion County. I believe that was the number that was in the newspaper today. So that's a promising number. So I do think that what we've seen is going to be potentially a little different, a lot faster than we thought it would be. But the other thing that I keep having in my mind is kind of that you're only a senior in high school once, or you're only in 7th grade once, potentially, you know, in some of these scenarios where we're having these necessary visitors that need to come in to impact specific students at specific grade levels. And another headline that resonated with me recently was that I guess the University of Florida didn't actually have any students that they signed for National Signing Day yesterday. We did have several students. I do want to congratulate those students that from Marion County that signed to various schools, but the University of Florida didn't. So I'm using this just as an illustration to say you're only a senior in high school once. And the NCAA has extended that college athletes who are seniors right now get an extra year. And so that is going to be impacting our own seniors going into from high school to college, and even having opportunities on some of those teams. And so I'm just using that as an illustration to say you're only a senior in high school once, and any kind of opportunities that we can give recruiters, obviously not athletic recruiters necessarily, but recruiters coming onto campuses is going to be significantly important for all of those kids for their futures.
Well, it didn't exclude athletic recruiters could still come, because that's vital to the kid getting the scholarship. So they were considered in this group. So, thank you, Dr. Amber.
Yes, and thank you, Board Member Cummings. You know, it is weighty, very weighty, and it's one thing to talk about the impact and the potential impact of a pandemic, but it's something else entirely to really be living it. You know, I mean, we're really living it, and we've been living it for a while, and I truly pray, it is my prayer, that if folks feel like the vaccination is for them, that they're able to get it quickly, and that we reach that herd immunity, and that we can begin to put this behind us. But one of the strengths of this board has been that, and the whole team, we've been nimble, and we continue to come together, and we're getting good information about what's really happening, and then we're adjusting accordingly. So let's not let ourselves get too down over this. We're going to get some subcommittees going quickly. We're going to look at what truly makes sense as necessary. And, you know, as far as the mask compliance thing, there are some, like I said before, there's schools that are very different. and so it's not a blanket anything. So I would suggest that with these subcommittees, that each school share, you know, what do they feel would be a necessary visitor, and does it fit the parameters that your committee has worked so hard to put into place? And if it does, then let's use our data for our decisions. And then, you know, the rest, all we can say is pandemics stink, and it is what it is. So that's my take on it.
Madam Chair, I hate to add to the burden of the decision-making and feedback, but Mr. Whitehouse and Ms. Kiner are also here to talk about some of the spring optional activities, such as prom, and also to talk about graduation.
Great.
You're ready to proceed with that.
Good morning, Board. So I did want to, first before we get started, update you very briefly on our numbers for MCPS Online, because we do like to keep you abreast of how we are trending as a district. So currently we have roughly 5,300 students remaining in the district on MCPS Online. That's about 13% of our current enrollment. in our traditional schools. So we are continuing to see a trend back to brick and mortar of all of our schools. The schools that continue to have the larger percent of students in MCPS online are mostly secondary schools, specifically within that southwest corridor around the 200 area, Westport, Liberty, some of those schools, still averaging around 20%. But for the most part, our trend has been increasingly lower MCPS online enrollment within our schools. So we're confident that's going to hopefully lead to some very good results for our students moving forward as they trend back. So brief updates on prom. We had discussed before, but we are continuing to move forward with plans for prom because it is a spring activity and an optional activity for our students who wish to participate. So currently we are setting up our agreements with different event venues for prom to be able to take place because it requires a lot of planning. It's not something that we can just decide in May, hey, we're doing prom this month and we go. It requires a lot of work, and so part of that process has been working with Attorney Powers to make sure that our agreements with these facilities have an out clause for us in case of COVID, that we can get a full refund for all these facilities leading right up to the event. So if we feel at that point as a team that this is not going to be an event that we can pull off safely for our students, then we certainly have that option to be able to back out. So right now we're looking at all local sites. We have no Disney trips planned for prom as we have in the past, to cut down obviously on bus transportation for those students and keep things in a much more local controlled environment. So we have a few schools that are looking at the Hilton, which is a pretty traditional prom location for some of our schools, and several of our schools right now looking at the World Equestrian Center, which is a beautiful venue if you haven't been out there, and a very large venue which allows us to do a little bit better spacing of students and social distancing within the prom venue. So what we're asking in terms of health and safety considerations for our schools, one, they have to understand that as they make these plans and start selling tickets, that the event can be canceled. And the students need to be fully aware of that. The parents need to be fully aware of that as they make these plans. Not only that, but they also have to understand that your child could end up being quarantined right before prom. And there's nothing we can do about it. If your child is quarantined by the Department of Health for 14 days and prom is tomorrow, we can't make an exception. And so they've got to enter into this knowing what the possibilities are for their students. So several considerations that we've asked of our schools. One, we have to make sure, even though it's not on Marion County School property, that face coverings will be worn at all times during the prom, even while dancing. There's no opportunity for them to take those off unless there is an opportunity for them to eat somewhere socially distanced at the venue.
What about taking pictures?
So what we've discussed is that if you are with a date, which we assume that your parents are aware that you're riding together and attending as a date, that there could be a couple picture, but what we're not going to have is large group pictures where everyone takes their masks off and poses for pictures. But an individual couple whose parents have agreed that they are attending together, they realize they're going to be in close proximity, we certainly want a better lasting memory than the two of them posing with masks on.
Correct.
Would be a sign of the times.
Correct. I'm sure they have enough of those on their phone that they don't need to add anymore. So we will certainly make that exception.
Interesting to see what the fashion designers come up.
Another consideration I think is very smart on the part of the schools is looking at breaking up our prom areas into smaller groups. So instead of having a large gathering of students, especially a large gathering on one dance floor, looking at some of these larger venues like World Equestrian Center, we can actually subdivide into smaller dance floor areas and have students select the dance floor they're going to be on and remain for the entire time. So in that actuality, we're actually talking about smaller groups of students dancing in smaller areas. Certainly not ideal, but it's very similar to when they select buses to ride to Grab Bash. They stay with their friends. They don't need to be around everybody, but I've got my group of friends that I want to be around during the prom activities. And that will help us on our end of making sure that we keep groups of students together in case there were any future contact tracing, which we certainly hope we will never have to do. And then also making sure we have solid guidelines in place for outside guest attendance. And so we know that we have students at schools who do date students outside of their traditional base school and have always in the past been able to bring those dates from other schools to the prom. And so we want to make sure that we have sound guidelines in place for them as well. And so it would require them to get permission from the school they do attend, which has been our past practice, that we have prom forms that they take to their school administration, that they sign off and say that the student is able to attend prom at your school site. That could also include students who are currently homeschooled, as we certainly do have some of those students. or even students within private schools, we could certainly apply that same aspect to those students as well. Again, we're looking at a purely voluntary activity, which is why we feel comfortable with at least moving forward with the planning stages, as this is not a requirement. It's something that parents have to make that decision for their child, what they feel most comfortable doing. So that's prom. Graduation plans, I also want to address.
Mr. Whitehouse, may I interrupt you?
Madam Chair, could we pause and get feedback from the board on that, on prom? What the board's wishes are on that?
I actually went with one of my high schools to World Equestrian Center and toured it with their whole student activities group, and completely believe that that is very feasible in the space that was considered and how they were considering where the food might be, how that would be distributed, if even at all. And it is more than ample the size for the potential small number of students that would be participating. And the students themselves came up with the idea of small groupings. If they were to potentially ride in the same limousine like they probably would do anyway, they would just stay with that same group. And all of them were saying wearing face coverings the whole time. And obviously they are trying to make something happen that the seniors last year didn't get. So they're trying to do everything they can to be as forward thinking on what can we do to make this safe for all of us. And so I appreciated the opportunity to see it firsthand. So I wanted you all to know that I have seen what that would look like. I don't know what it looked like at the Hilton, but I do know what it would look like at World Equestrian, and I'm very comfortable with. Those arenas are ginormous, and they wouldn't even need like 2/3 of it. So just even with a couple hundred people, they definitely have thought that through.
And I would say that's the spirit, let's salvage everything that we can and put things in place to make it as safe as possible, and then let the parents make their best decision on behalf of their kids.
And I agree. I think I like moving forward with prom, as long as it can be in April or early May. I don't think we need to have them any earlier than that, but I think by then.
Later the better.
Yeah, so I say go for it. I'm very pleased.
Anybody else?
I'm good with that. I think we need to make sure that the parents give permission. I don't want us to assume any legal liability because we held an event and it got out of hand. So I think we need to have something legal on that part.
I'm glad you've been part of the conversations too, Mr. Powers. It's important.
So, Madam Chair, to that point, typically in our high schools, we have prom agreements that any students who are attending have to sign along with their parent so that they understand what the expectations are for attending prom, but also what the requirements are for academics, attendance, and behavior, so that even if I purchase a ticket in February, if I do any of these things leading up to that, I can be removed from that prom list, and so they sign off and their parents. So we would certainly have all those expectations laid out for them.
Definitely have gotten those phone calls before. Ms. King.
Now, how, because we just talked about other kids outside of Marion County school kids, such as private school or kids that have graduated. How are we going to track that? Do they have to provide the name of their date prior to them coming to the prom, or what if they break up with that person, decide to bring somebody or stuff happens.
But they have to do that now. If they're
they've
bringing somebody
always
from
done that.
outside the school, the school has to agree to that. They have to
Are
have.
they able to do they make change? I don't know. It was different when I went to the prom. We didn't have to tell anybody who we were bringing. We just went. So that's why I'm asking.
So we actually, when we sell prom tickets at the high school, you have to list who your date is if you are purchasing an additional ticket. And we only sell to students unless we have identified who that student is, they've been provided a prom agreement and a school permission agreement that the school administrator that they attend has to sign off that they are eligible to attend our prom, that they would sign off on that student coming to our prom. And then once we have all those documents in place, we would sell them a ticket for their date. And if they were to change dates at any point, they would have to have all that documentation for whoever they brought, unless it was a student at that base school, and obviously we knew the student and could sign on at that point.
What if their date was a freshman at CF and not a student in Marion County?
So We have traditionally prevented anyone, obviously, who would be age 21 or older from attending any of our proms. But we do from time to time have students who are recent graduates. And certainly we know that last year's senior class did not get a prom.
Correct.
So if we have any of those seniors that are, would like to come as a date with a current senior, certainly we don't want to deprive them twice if we can do so in a reasonable manner and feel comfortable about that decision.
Vice Chair King?
Yeah, it sounds like a board that is in favor of the prom. So when I think about students going to prom, they're going to be excited. And even if they may feel a little under the weather because it's so exciting, they may still decide to attend. So looking forward, you mentioned temperature checks earlier with the necessary visitors. Are there going to be temperature checks that when the students do enter as a precaution, or?
We can certainly add that if that's the will of the board, but up to this point, we have not done temperature checks of large groups of students, only because DOH has told us over and over it's not a good indicator of whether a student really is under the weather, because if I take some Motrin prior to coming, I may still have symptoms, but fever would not be one of them because the Motrin has now eliminated that. So we really have to continue to rely on our students and parents to do that screening for us and make sure that they're making the best decision for their child.
Okay, because that's what I'm just thinking. I know they would be excited to go, and we have had other events. My other concern is the picture taking. You said they could take their mask off. I know lots of times, or many students, they take pictures beforehand anyways, and they're outside. So I wonder almost if this year, and I hate to be the damper on anything, but I almost wonder if we should encourage students to go to the park, have their pictures outside, have their mask off, then with each other rather than in an enclosed building, taking their picture with, I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. Because if I see students taking off their mask and then next, and then, I don't know. So I do believe that the masks are very important because I know I've been exposed to people, and my mask, I'm sure my mask has been a reason why I have not, been ill. So I'm just throwing that out there too, just,
You do raise a good point, Ms. King, and it's a good reminder, you see on Facebook, it's become quite a cottage industry, these beautiful photographs before the prom and everybody lined up and all their pictures being taken. It would be a lot less monitoring. Again, our decisions affect the folks that are going to be there doing the work, to just say, you got to wear your mask. That's it. You got to wear your mask. And if you want to decorate it, prom 2021, then whatever. It could open up some designer choices. So that's something maybe for us to think about. Again, the fact that a lot of pictures are taken before the event itself, and while they're at the event, let's just keep it as simple and mitigate as much risk as we can. That's. Anybody else?
No, I think that's a good idea.
Cummings?
Good.
I'm fine with that, or if the professional photographer for the prom was actually outside taking the pictures, outside on their way in or something, I would be fine with that too. I'm not certain what time of day the prom is gonna start, but say it starts whenever it's still daylight outside, having the professional, because some people aren't gonna have access to going to the park or wherever else in advance. So I just don't wanna limit the opportunities to have an actual keepsake photograph of the event, if we can.
Well, even if it's at night, if he's a professional, he or she's a professional, they'll have the lighting in the backdrops to make sure that it can be outside and done well. Yeah, I would think.
Could use y'all's input on this, and if you need to come, we still have time, so I would be comfortable even with you guys coming back to us, because again, I think about the monitoring, I think about what are we emphasizing here, all those things.
Yes, ma'am, happy to do so.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll touch on graduation very briefly. As you are aware, graduation dates are tentatively set right now. We've had them on the calendar this entire school year. Our earliest ones being May 28th, so still way off in the distance, which is Hillcrest and Vanguard High School, and culminating on June 5th with Bellevue High School. We have Livestock Pavilion tentatively reserved for that weekend for the schools that traditionally graduate at the Livestock Pavilion, which would include Vanguard, Forest, North Marion, and Lake Weir, the rest of them being at their school sites. So at this point, my recommendation is we're still too early to decide on attendance requirements and what type of, how many people per student we would allow, capacity limits, et cetera, because we're in February and then we're talking, first week of June really for most of these schools. But we certainly have successfully pulled off graduations last year, as you all were able to see, with very limited capacity and social distancing of all of our parents and students and staff. So we know how to do that very quickly now that we have that plan in place. So if it comes to that point and we feel uncomfortable with allowing any sort of large gathering in those stadiums or at the Livestock Pavilion, we can certainly shift back to that expectation of 2 tickets per graduate and be able to move forward with those plans very quickly.
Well, I was thoroughly pleased with how you guys pulled it off this past year. We were able to, everybody was able to attend that needed to attend. Of course, there were some issues as far as people wanting extra tickets and all those things, but I think the plan that we had last year worked. We didn't hear about any major COVID spread events or anything like that. And I think each one of us went to our own designated schools, so that made a difference. So if as long as we're at that plan, I'm good with that. I trust that you guys know how to set it up. We've done it before.
Yes, sir.
Practice makes perfect.
But I agree with Mr. Whitehouse that I think it's too early for us to do that, but we know how to do it, and we know how to do it quickly. So I would say let's just monitor and then come back with your plan.
And I also question the use of potentially World Equestrian Center for that. I know that you said we are agreed to go to Southeast Livestock Pavilion. I know that at least one of the arenas there holds 6,000 with seats that you can actually assign seats to people with backs and all, and that obviously is much different than what the Southeast Livestock Pavilion opportunity is. So I don't know how the contracting works or what all of that looks like, but it is too early, but as we explore this, I think there is an additional opportunity with going somewhere where we can actually give seat numbers, and that would help in a lot of ways to ensure the number of people that would attend as well as where they would be placed.
Great points. And last year, Vanguard's was, outside over at Booster, and it was a beautiful morning. We were really blessed with the cool weather. Not so much by the time North Marion High rolled around. It was hot. So I love the idea of being able to be in a climate-controlled setting as well, or at least shade for everybody, and great point about the seating. So I'd love to see that explored too, or are we locked into the Livestock Pavilion?
So to your answer to both of your questions, I don't believe we are locked in yet. We asked them at the beginning of the year to hold those dates to make sure they didn't schedule any rodeos, because that is the typical rodeo timeline, and so they want to make sure that we have that opportunity. We do have a few schools that are considering and exploring the World Equestrian Center. The question that most of the principals have, though, is access for their families to be able to get to the World Equestrian Center. It is very far west, especially for some of our schools like Lake Weir, a little too far south for some of our communities like North Marion, where it's a long distance to travel, even Bellevue. But I know Forest has entertained the idea of Westport, Donnell, and both of those graduate
Westport
stadiums.
would be, yeah, a no-brainer.
Fairly close for them. So I know each of those principals are weighing out those options and trying to explore what would be best for their schools and their families.
I wonder if it would end up being the Livestock Pavilion for some, like the reasons you stated, and then World for some others. Westport's right down the street, and so, and also cost is a factor, I'm sure. So, okay, well, we're off to a good start.
I have one more thing to say because I've been thinking about, I have everyone that's been part of the discussions for earlier with the volunteers and now. As a board member, I'm not a health expert, and I did get a little bit of conflicting information today. And it was earlier when we were going to ask the necessary visitors to come to the classroom, it was said that they would have a temperature check. And then now I'm hearing, when I'm like, okay, students, then I hear that the CDC says that the temperature checks don't work. So as I sit up here and in less than an hour, I heard two different conflicting information set. So I just want to put that out there that, you know, as I sat up here and trying to help make good informed decisions, I've had reasons for why we should or why we shouldn't on this same issue. And I'll let that go.
Well, yeah, part of it too is that hopefully our necessary volunteers won't be self-medicating so that they could come in that day, where a student that may or may not get to go to prom and get turned away at the door, I suppose there's that. But yes, and when you're also, I think we also talked about the low yield and high yield to try to temperature check every kid that comes into the school in the morning. You're spending a lot of instructional time trying to do that. But yeah, more clarification would be good because we did kind of hear two different things.
Reasons why we should or shouldn't. So that's why I'm like, we either do or we don't. Like it either works or it doesn't. And that's where I just kind of.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, the proposal is consistent with our reopening plan, which within our reopening plan, we agreed that we would not do mass temperature checks of our students for just that reason. We were not confident that it would really yield anything to substantially mitigate, not to mention the time consumption of trying to temperature check. However, we have had in that plan visitors to our campus that are coming for parent conferences and IEP meetings, did have to fill out those questionnaires and were temperature checks. So maintaining that consistency in what we expect of our students versus our visitors.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is we probably need to revisit because it just doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a visitor or a student. If you know, if you either do or you don't, it's not consistent. So that's all.
If I may, Madam Chair, Board Member King, I agree. And we have talked, as you all know, regularly with the Department of Health, and we have brought this up periodically, and they have never advised us to do that. So, and I know the reopening committee worked really hard on this, and this has been from some time ago, from the beginning of the pandemic. And so as we're agile and adjusting to the information from experts, I think that committee should consider that because that's not something we've ever been advised to do.
And with all due respect to everybody on that conversation, I have an issue. I'll tell you why I have an issue. Recently, I had a meeting at the health department. I had to take a temperature. So that's conflict of, I got an issue. I got an issue. So do whatever you want, but I have an issue with that, yeah.
Andrea. Yes. And Board Member Cummings, that's precisely why we need to go back to the Department of Health and say, let's clarify and make sure that this is something you don't advise us to do, because I have to. My temperature.
Yes. Well, and we do have our resident health experts sitting with us. So, Ms. Simmons.
Not really an expert, but I can say from putting that out there, from the CDC page, it's not that screening is not recommended, it's that mass temperature checks and screenings are not recommended because that puts everybody all clumped up waiting to get screened. So it's not able for people to social distance and follow all the other mitigation measures while you're waiting in line to be screened and checked. So that's why in mass situations, they don't do the screening, but on individual, like when you go visit the health department and other places, it's more controlled. And that's so, and the wording does say mass screenings are not recommended, not individual screenings are not recommended.
Okay, so I guess if you're in a mass, you're, right, I do too. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense when you think about it.
Because I see people going to take these vaccinations at the mall and different vaccination sites, they're screening them.
You're saying mass, M-A-S-S.
M-A-S-S.
Mass.
They're screening them at a mass.
Yeah, we definitely don't, right. I was thinking the same thing.
Just for clarity, mass.
Not M-A-S-K, M-A-S-S.
Correct.
Yes, we still like mass. Well, not really, but we need them. Okay. Anything else from anybody regarding these topics? Gosh.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Hembrook.
Yes, thank you.
Tell the dog he can run around the house now.
That's right.
He was just laid back on the
I know,
sofa
it
like
was
this.
funny. I saw his head go.
Yeah. And is there any public comment? Seeing none. Okay, moving on. Our next administrative briefing and work session is scheduled for February 18th, 2021 at 9 a.m. We will review McIntosh Charter School renewal application, review of school staffing plans, 2 of 2, but I think we said we didn't need that.
Right.
Right, so that one was struck. Construction projects update, social emotional learning curriculum, Q2 transformation schools data update. All right.
Madam Thrower, may I ask, is the Q2 transformational, is that where the principals are going to come again? Okay, all right, good. Just wanting, thank you.
No, Board Member
clarify that.
Campbell, it's the update with Mr. McGowan and with Ms. Kynard.
Thank you.
District level and transformation schools, yes.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to board concerns. Ms. Kimmel, we'll start with you today and then work our way around.
Okay, I just have a couple of things. We had talked a little bit earlier about choice scholarships, and I just wanted to stress something that I said frequently prior to actually sitting here. While I understand that school choice is a hot button issue and a hot topic issue, my opinion is that Marion County Public Schools needs to be doing everything that we can to be the choice. So I think that just further says what Dr. Gullett's expectations are and how she is talking about raising the bar, and that we need to be a district that's in the top in the state. And the more we do that, the more we will be the choice. And so concern about choice scholarship options won't be as disconcerting down the road. And that's an opinion, obviously, but that's the belief that I have on that. I also wanted to thank the area directors. I have now met with Dr. Hembrook and Mr. Whitehouse, and I will be meeting with Ms. Kynard at the end of this week, just kind of getting to know a little bit more about what all they're doing. That's not, I didn't meet with them prior to sitting here, and so I'm pleased with what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, and I'm going to try and start joining some of them as they're going on some of their visits in schools that are in District 1. Another visit that I had this week was at New Leaf. I went and visited with Miss Vernon and Miss Malpica, and they answered a lot of questions for me. It was an eye-opening experience, but it was also a heartwarming experience, because I know that the care and effort they're putting in with some of our, and I'm saying they are our students, even though they are currently alternatively placed, that the care and the expertise that they're putting in with those students is valued, and it's important work. And so I was grateful for that opportunity. And then the last thing I was going to say is I also received the survey that I assume went out to parents and maybe others to review the student code of conduct. So I'm just going to encourage parents to be a part of that, be an active participant in looking over that, because those recommendations will be taken into consideration when the student code of conduct is reviewed later on. So parents, make sure that you are taking part. That's it.
Thank you, Board Member Campbell. Board Member Cummings.
No comments today. It's too cold. I'm freezing over here. So no, but very, very good work session this morning. So got a lot of information.
Sure did. Thank you, Board Member Cummings. Board Member McCall.
No comments.
Vice Chair King.
I was just going to echo Dr. Gullett earlier when she said it's National School Counselors Week. So we are just very grateful for each and every one of you. You guys work very hard with our students, and I am so grateful for that. And then also, it was a great meeting today, and with our staffing plan, it was excellent, because when I was sitting here talking to Ms. Dobbins, Mark and stuff, but Dr. Gullett, you've done an exceptional job with this, because this board has a vision and you have bold goals for our staff. And one thing I have noticed is that Dr. Gullett is very open to hear and understand what's going on at each and every school, and with the principals and stuff. And she's done a great job of encouraging the staff that if there's a need or something going on, to be like, hey, look over here and let's talk this through and work through that. And I see that starting to happen with this plan and moving forward. And that's excellent leadership. And I'm very excited and looking forward to see where we're heading, because this is leadership at its finest. So thank you.
Ditto.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Gullett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just thank you all for your feedback, as always, and your leadership, and we look forward to the next time we're together. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Powers.
Nothing to add today.
Okay, all right. Ms. Prespatino. All right, well, and yes, just to wrap it up, we have, we've had to do a lot of heavy lifting, but we continue to overcome, you know? We continue to overcome, we continue to pull together, we continue to build trust with each other and be part of the same mission and all pulling on the same side of the rope. So I'm excited for what's to come. And thank you all today. This was a very productive work session, and we'll see you all again soon. So if there's nothing else for the good of the cause, we shall adjourn at 12:22 p.m.